All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock. So I will call the meeting of the City of Madera Beach Planning Commission to order. Please call the roll.
Chairman Wyckoff. Commissioner Brooks. Here. Commissioner Noble.
Here.
Commissioner Connolly.
Here.
Commissioner Marr.
Here.
Commissioner Dillon. And Commissioner LaRue.
Here.
Okay, we have Commissioner LaRue is joining us by telephone, teleconference. So in that case, we need a motion from our Planning Commission members to accept his presence by phone conference in order for him to participate. So the motion will be to allow him to attend and participate in the meeting by teleconference.
I'll make a motion to allow Commissioner LaRue to attend via teleconference
And participate?
and participate.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to allow Mr. LaRue to participate by teleconference. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anybody have any questions or discussion on it? Okay, please call for the vote.
Commissioner Brooks.
Yes.
Commissioner Marr.
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly.
Yes.
Commissioner Noble.
Yes.
Commissioner LaRue.
Yes.
And Chairman Wyckoff.
Yes. So we have participation from Mr. LaRue. Thanks for joining us. And chime in whenever appropriate, please. So our first item is public comment. So public participation is encouraged, obviously, in all of our city dealings. And if you're addressing the Planning Commission, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Your comments, please be limited to 3 minutes and do not include any topic that is currently on our agenda. The public comment will be available on those agenda items at the time the public comment, the agenda item is being considered. And for any quasi judicial hearings that might be on the agenda, an affected person may become a party to this proceeding and is entitled to present evidence at the hearing, including sworn testimony of witnesses and relevant exhibits and other documentary evidence, and cross-examine all witnesses by filing a notice of intent to be a party with the city clerk, not less than 5 days prior to the hearing. That will become germane in just a little bit. So if anybody has any public comment on any items not on our agenda, please feel free to step up to the podium, state your name and address, and have your 3 minutes.
Hello, good evening. Excuse my attire. I left my kid's soccer practice. David DeMont Mullen, 464 137th Avenue Circle. Cautionary tale. My parents used to live on Anna Maria Island for a long time. It's a great place, a beach town. And went there about 5 years ago, stuck in traffic. Place is a zoo. It basically went from an amazing little beach town. It got heralded as one of the most unknown, coolest beaches, best beaches in the state, in the country. People from all over the world all of a sudden knew about Anna Maria Island. Started coming down there. Developers saw the opportunity. Single family homes got bought, 8, 9 bedroom places, 5 or 6 cars at night. You go to Publix there on the weekend, it literally is a zoo as all the tourists come in and try to load up for the week. Basically, it rendered this cool little place not a beach town anymore, right? So, as I keep thinking about how great Madera Beach is, and I wanted to stay the same, and I know a lot of other people do. We don't want more development. We want less density. We want to keep Madera Beach a beach town and a cool place. And I know that tourism is a fact of life, but being heralded as a number 9 beach in the world is something that we don't want, right? I mean, go look at Clearwater Beach. It is a zoo up there. People from all over the world go there, and it's not good for the residents. So what I'm saying is I want to resist any new growth. I want to resist any more density, any more development, and I know a lot of other residents like me want to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Any others for public comment for items not on our agenda this evening?
Good evening, Rose Loggett, 13231 Gulf Lane. And I too am familiar with Anna Maria Island, so I'm going to piggyback on the previous person's sentiments. Madeira Beach has always been a unique environment, a small fishing village. I mentioned it at a meeting before when a very large contract was pending, and all of a sudden off the website disappeared the unique fishing village. But we do recognize, we the residents recognize that progress has to take place. We do need the money coming in. However, we did have a cohesive plan at one point in time to maintain that small fishing village environment. And this is why people come here. They don't want a Clearwater Beach. They don't want a Madeira, a St. Pete Beach or a Miami. What they like is the old Florida feeling. It's large enough to get around and have ease of traffic, but yet it's small enough to give you that old beach feeling. Jimmy Buffett used to play here years ago and actually stay on an old house on 132nd and Gulf Lane. And Gulf Lane is a community that's unique as well because we have a lot of residential houses there. And if you come down the boulevard, you can see how we've made mistakes in the past. You come off of Tom Stewart Causeway, we were supposed to see the beach between the two buildings, and what do we see? A parking garage entrance. Come down Madeira Way, the beach is right there. What we did was move the concession stand from the side of the property right in the middle. So what you see is a concession stand. I think what we do need to do is pedal back and talk to the residents and find out, do we in fact want to retain this small fishing village, beautiful beaches, the best on the Gulf Coast? And how are we going to do that? How are we going to make buildings consistent with the area rather than this brick and windows that we allowed to happen on Tom Stewart and now is pending on the pass. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for some public comments for items not on our agenda? Please.
Good evening. My name is Andrea Cummins, 13062 Gulf Lane, almost across the street from John's Pass. I agree with the previous two people that got up here and gave their thoughts about how they would like to see this beach develop. I'm not against for development. I am against overdevelopment. I am for redevelopment at a small scale. Our streets cannot take tall buildings and more traffic. It's very annoying for the residents and for the tourists trying to get in and out of their motels and make a left turn or a right turn. So there are cities in this country, beaches, that are small scale, and they're actually more valuable than the bigger islands with the tall buildings. And that's what makes it unique, is the smallness, the scale. Like I said, I am for redevelopment, but not overdevelopment. And you have a very important decision to make. I hope that you make the right one, not only for the residents, but for the tourists who come here for the beautiful beach that we have at a smaller scale. Really hope you're listening to me and think this over carefully, because once you build the white elephant, there's no going back. There's no knocking it down. So please, we want small scale, want a beautiful island, something where you can get in your car, drive without a whole queue of cars on the roads where you can't move. Please, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Diane Holman and I live at 13290 3rd Street East. And I'm just here for a different thing because I'm interested in more public transportation out on Madeira Beach. And I'm trying to give up using my car so much. And I was really excited when I saw that the Sunrunner went in from St. Pete Beach to downtown St. Pete. And I was wondering if there's any possibility that we could get that Sunrunner to come to Johns Pass. And I think that would be great for a connection between St. Pete and the beaches and in tourism. And in addition, I'd like to see, I think Johns Pass Village is one of our crown jewels in our city. And I think we need to make it more of a landmark in our city. And I'd like to see it more mixed usage for residents and our tourists. And I'd like to see it more walkable and with more green space also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, I don't see anybody. Okay, very good. Thank you all for your time and your comments. Our next item is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. I have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for the previous meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 7th meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Didn't see any corrections needed. If not, please call the roll.
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner Noble,
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner LaRue,
yes,
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff.
Yes,
Thank you.
we have approval of the minutes. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is our new business. Item A is ordinance 2023-01, Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan. Will our city attorney please read us by title?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good evening. Ordinance 2023-01, an ordinance of the city of Madeira Beach, Florida, adopting the Madeira Beach Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan, providing for an introductory statement of plan, purpose, and overview, providing for background, history, and community engagement, providing for the plan area, existing and proposed uses and density intensity standards and distinct character districts, providing for transportation impacts and connectivity, providing for coastal high hazard area considerations, providing for planning and urban design principles, providing for implementation strategies, providing for transmittal to and consideration by Forward Pinellas and the Countywide Planning Authority, providing for transmittal to the Florida State Department of Economic Opportunity for their review and comment, providing for the filing of this amendment in the office of the city clerk, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you for reading that. The first item we need to address, I believe, is any affected parties.
Yes, there were 6 individuals who provided a notice of intent to be an affected party prior to today's hearing within the appropriate time frame, which, as you noted before, was not less than 5 days before the hearing. The city received 1 notice of intent to be an affected party today from Margaret Ebel, because Ms. Ebel's notice of intent was not less than 5 days before the hearing. She would not be considered an affected party per the city's code. She obviously still can have a moment for public comment when that is appropriate later in the proceeding. I will let the board and the individuals know who did make their notice of intent filed timely. They're going to have an opportunity to speak in the order in which the city received the notices. The first individual, and apologize if I get any names incorrect, Kathleen Berman will be affected party number 1. Richard Leggett. You'll be affected party number 2. Joanne Claben, affected party number 3. Robert Bello, affected party number 4. Thomas Edwards, affected party number 5. James Levine, affected party number 6. The order of presentation per the city's code will be the city providing their presentation. The affected parties will each have a turn as 1 through 6 to question any questions of the city. The board will have, of course, the first opportunity to question the city after their presentation. Once the city is done and those questions are done, then each affected party in that order will have an opportunity to present whatever testimony or evidence they want to present. The board will have a chance to ask them questions, and city staff will also have a chance to ask any questions of them should they wish to. Once everyone has an opportunity to do that, each affected party, there'll be public comment. Once public comment is done, the city will have a chance to provide any rebuttal that they wish to provide to anything that the affected parties have presented. And then your hearing will be concluded and you can make a motion and deliberate should you choose to. So that kind of gives everybody an idea of how it will run. I will be here all night to help us keep on track because I know it's a lot to take in. So at this point, since everyone kind of knows what we're doing, I'll go ahead and read the quasi judicial procedures and we can get started. This is a quasi judicial proceeding where the commission acts in a quasi judicial rather than legislative capacity at a quasi judicial hearing. And it's not the commission's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi judicial hearing, the commission is required by law to make finding of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those finding of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at the hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant must meet that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the commission is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if this competent, substantial, relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established by the Code of Ordinances, then the commission is required by law to find against the applicant. Anyone that's planning to provide any testimony today, affected parties included, need to stand and raise their right hand to be sworn in, including city staff. Thank you. You swear to or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first step will be our city's presentation.
Andrew will coax me through this.
There we are.
My name is Dave Healy. I'm a planning consultant. Our offices are in Clearwater, the Healy Consultant Group, Healy Consultant Services. We are community planning, land use, and development consultants. It's been my pleasure to work for the last several months with the staff in the preparation of the report and the activity center plan and proposed map change. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with the commission previously. I did sit through your earlier workshop when Jenny was here. She's otherwise occupied this week for better reasons. I do have a copy of my resume that I'll leave with the clerk for the public record. Just summarize it quickly by saying I've been a practicing city planner for some 53 years, the last 47 years in Pinellas County, working for and with local government. I'm a charter member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and a fellow of the American Institute of Certified Planners. So it's been my pleasure to work with the staff, and with Andrew's help, we'll walk through a summary of the plan, if we may. You have the staff report in front of you as part of the agenda package, and it summarizes very well what we set out to do, what the intended purpose of the activity center is, and the recommendation of staff ultimately to approve the plan and the corresponding plan map amendment. So with that, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we'll start through a series of slides.
Please do.
The plan is organized in 7 parts, 7 chapters. They're identified here. And I will, as I walk through this, reference to the pages in the report that I'm referring to. Obviously, this is a synopsis of what's in the full plan report. I won't attempt to verbalize or explain each and every detail, but I think it will give the board a good overview of what we've done, why we've done it, and what the ultimate objective is, as well as the steps required to put it in place. So we'll walk through each of the chapters, the first of which is an introduction. It talks about the purpose, the plan overview, and the implementation steps. As Jenny has outlined in the staff memorandum, it's really a threefold purpose. First and foremost, to try and recognize, memorialize, if you will, and protect the existing character of Johns Pass Village. It is a special place in the community and it's been there for some long period of time. Calling it an activity center is not particularly new or creative. It has been operating essentially as that for some period of time. But in the comprehensive plan for the city, it's never been put forward in terms of specific standards and guidelines that would govern its future revitalization and potential redevelopment. It does provide for and would make sure that the city plan is consistent with the countywide plan. As we walk through this, you'll see that in a number of instances, they are not now consistent. It is a requirement that they be consistent, but beyond that, it's desirable. And there is a way to do that that is in the best interest, we think, of both Johns Pass Village and the city of Madeira Beach. It also makes sure that future redevelopment will be compatible and consistent with that character that we're attempting to recognize and maintain. And on this first slide, it outlines for the first time, we'll go into more detail about this, the area proposed to be designated as the activity center, from essentially the boardwalk area along the pass north to 133rd Avenue. From the coastal construction control line on the west, east to the properties that face Pelican Lane. The second chapter talks about background and history. This is a retrospective, in part, if you will, of what has preceded what is there today from its earliest development in the early 1900s, with the initial development that took place through a series of different construction and land use planning activities in the 1960 to 2008 and 2008 to 2022 periods. It's interesting to note that the first zoning ordinance for the city was adopted in about 1967 or 69, I believe, and the first comprehensive plan in 1989. What's interesting about that 1989 comprehensive plan, it talked about policies for an activity center for Johns Pass Village, but never put in place the guidelines, the standards, the mechanism by which to memorialize or achieve that particular policy. This is an attempt to do that. As part of the background and context in Chapter 2, we talk about community engagement. Preceding my involvement here, there were extensive outreach efforts, 2 public meetings, one meeting for the general public and one for businesses. There was apparently an online survey and considerable feedback from the public about what a desirable plan would attempt to accomplish in the village. Alternatives were presented, and as a result of those alternatives, the feedback that was provided did give direction to the plan that's in front of you tonight. Specifically, 2 of the things that were mentioned in that feedback were to limit the extent of the activity center running north from the core of Johns Pass Village to about 133rd Avenue, as opposed to one of the alternatives which showed it extending all the way to the town center, further north to Madeira Way. The other principal direction that was given was to distinguish better within the overall activity center among the component parts. There are distinct parts of the activity center, and some of them are recognized in the existing land use plan, but to get down to a finer grain detail of what the land use density, intensity, and design guidelines should be for those component parts of the plan. The core of the plan is Chapter 3. It talks about the plan in several aspects. It runs through some of the existing characteristics. We started by looking at the existing uses. Andrew's prepared a map here that is on pages 17 to 33 of the report that shows those existing uses and their composition. Just briefly, I'll touch on a couple of things. I know some of these slides are hard to read in terms of the detail. The predominant uses are multifamily and temporary lodging, along with tourist and general commercial, comprise nearly 80% of the uses in the activity center. A small part of the activity center, however, is devoted to marine commercial, and that's a unique and important part of the activity center that we want to recognize and provide for, and we do. It shows the percentage of use in each area, not only by the overall activity center, but it breaks it down by these 6 character districts that we'll come to describe in more detail. They are called, so for future reference, the Boardwalk, Commercial Core, the Johns Pass Resort, the Low Intensity Mixed Use, the Traditional Village, and the Transitional Character District. So within the overall 27 acres that we propose to designate as the activity center, there are 6 separate sub areas, if you will, that we want to recognize and distinguish. A second component of looking at the existing situation was what is the existing density and intensity? Again, there's a map here that shows the existing range of floor area ratios. And we've talked about that. I know Jenny talked in some detail with you at the last meeting about what that means. It's just the amount of building area on the lot area. And you can see there's a wide range here from fairly low intensity to some that are considerably higher. The yellow lighter colors representing lower intensity, the darker brown colors, the more intensive area. What I would call your particular attention to are the density ranges then specifically for residential, range from approximately 5 units an acre up to some 45 units and 70 units an acre in one case. The temporary lodging use range from 12 and 17 up to 34 and almost 60 units an acre for temporary lodging. And the floor area ratio itself then is enumerated in the far right-hand side. What's interesting about that we'll dwell on in some detail later is that if you look at the high end of the range, and that's only a part of the area, obviously, each one of those dense floor area ratios exceed the current permitted floor area ratio in either or both the city and countywide plan. That's one of the problematic features of the inconsistency. So when we look at the upper end of that range, we know there are existing uses there today that exceed what the standards are today. That's problematical for those uses, obviously, if they were to be damaged or destroyed. We recognize in saying that there are non-conforming use provisions in the code that give them some protection, but that is also limiting in terms of what they can do and how they rebuild if they were to choose to do that. So that's one of the things we want to take into account. A third thing that we've looked at in terms of existing conditions is average lot size. The average lot size throughout the activity center is quite small. It averages overall just more than 1/4 of an acre, about 11,720 square feet. It's different, again, in each of the character districts. So there is a range there. But again, when you think of what is there now and what could potentially go there, at least at the present time, the lot area is an important factor, is very relevant in determining what can actually be built or how much can be built on a given piece of property. So again, all of that's by way of trying to better understand what's there today and recognize that in what we're doing with the plan. The next part of the plan turns to looking specifically at the 2 existing plans that we're trying to harmonize, trying to make compatible. And that is the countywide future land use map and the city future land use map. And this is shown on that slide. It is on the left, the countywide future land use plan. The categories are slightly different in name. There's one more category in the city plan than the countywide plan. Some of those aren't terribly problematical just because the names are different. But a couple of the points here to make at this juncture is, for example, under the retail and services category in the countywide plan, which is the boardwalk, the commercial core, and most of the traditional village, the maximum floor area ratio is 0.55. In the city plan, it's 1.2. They don't work together. They need to, simply said. There are also other discrepancies in terms of the specific permitted uses and density intensity that we'll elaborate on as we go forward. But this tried to capture in one slide, in one description, where some of these incongruities, if you will, incompatibilities are between the city and countywide plan. So our objective is first and foremost, of course, to address what the city needs and how we can best serve the interests of Johns Pass Village and the entirety of the city. But in doing that, we're consistently trying to balance that and take into account what the countywide plan will require, because in the end, as I will tell you, they have to approve a proposed amendment to the countywide plan in order for any of this to work. And we'll talk about those specific steps here in a little bit. The next slide shows how the map would look if the map amendment in the second of the two ordinances that the city attorney read were to be approved. It would change from the map we just looked at with the 5 different categories ranging from commercial general to residential medium, and replace those with, on the map, an activity center for the entirety of the area. It's 27 acres of upland area, about 40 acres, including public rights of way. Within, though, that overall designation of activity center, we want to specifically recognize in the plan, and we do, the 6 character districts that I referenced earlier. And they're shown here. You'll see, based on the coloration in the map, that they resemble very much the categories that are now distinguished, but called something different: general commercial, mixed use, resort. And each of them, as we'll look at here in a second, has its own distinctive characteristics and proposed standards. So along the boardwalk, it's the character of that, the unique nature of that boardwalk calls for its distinct treatment as separate from what we call the commercial core, which is the commercial area behind it, up to 129. Then the traditional village along Village Boulevard. I don't need to be describing what's there to you folks, you know what's there. East of that on Pelican Lane is the low intensity mixed use area that is now essentially the same thing, called medium density residential. And then on the west side of Gulf Boulevard, two different sub-districts, character districts. The resort district, which is what is there today, basically a resort classification. And then north of that, the transitional district, both east and west of Gulf Boulevard, to provide for a transition for the somewhat more intensive area of Johns Pass Village in its core area to the area to the north, which becomes more mixed in use and somewhat abutting residential in a number of places. So that would be a component, an overall component of the plan. Okay, what does that all mean? Let's talk about some numbers. These can be deadly boring, but they're important. So the next slide shows what we propose in terms of the residential, temporary lodging, and floor area ratio standards for each of the separate districts. I'm not going to read these to you. The commission has these in front of you, but they range from no residential in the Boardwalk District to 24 units an acre in Johns Pass Resort or the Transitional District. And the same thing on the temporary lodging use from its most intense area in the commercial core or Johns Pass Resort to a lesser standard in the traditional village and the transitional districts. So there's a step down there that occurs based on the existing makeup of uses and the intended long-term relationship between those uses. There is a footnote on these. You'll see there's 2 numbers in some of the columns for temporary lodging and floor area ratio. What we've tried to do is provide an opportunity for a bonus. If a particular project and property warrants and can meet the requirements, they can apply for additional intensity, but only with the approval of a development agreement. That would require 2 public hearings, one by the Planning Commission, one by the City Commission, in order to award, if you would, then any additional density or intensity. It shows the number of acres in each of the character districts and the percentage of the total in those character districts. So hopefully it gives you a good feel for the breakdown, how it's organized and differentiated. That's, I know, a lot to chew on initially, if you haven't seen those numbers before. So what we've tried to do is give you a frame of reference, and specifically for the Planning Commission. This next slide shows what the existing Madeira Beach City Plan would allow, what the existing countywide plan would allow, and what the new activity center plan would allow for in relationship to the maximum parameters or standard of the countywide plan. So let me back up and walk through that. What we're saying there is that if all of the property in the activity center were devoted to residential use under the existing standards of the Madeira Beach plan, it would potentially or hypothetically allow for 16 dwelling units an acre. The same rationale for all temporary lodging use, 51 temporary lodging or hotel units, and the floor area ratio of 1.24. That's under the existing city plan. I won't read the numbers, but you can see how they compare to the existing countywide plan. In some cases, the existing city plan is less in terms of the residential use, but for temporary lodging, it's greater than is the countywide plan. The third column shows the proposed standard in the Johns Pass Village Activity Center. If this plan were adopted, it would allow, rather than the 16 in the current city plan, some 19 residential units. Again, under the hypothesis that everything developed is residential, which we know isn't the case and won't be the case. But it's just a way to compare the standards from current to proposed. Temporary lodging would go from 51 to 56, and the floor area ratio from 1.24 to 1.93. The maximum under the activity center designation that we are using or propose to use under the countywide plan is called a community center standard. And under the countywide plan, there's actually 4 categories of activity center, from major, which might be downtown St. Pete, to urban, which is, I think, used in St. Pete Beach, to community center. I'm sorry, I keep wanting to get away from the microphone. To community center, which is the third tier or the third level of activity center. So it isn't the highest or even the second highest. It's the third highest level of activity center. The fourth is a neighborhood center. And the column on the far right shows what the maximum would be under the countywide plan: 90 residential units, 150 temporary lodging units, and a floor area ratio of 3. We don't need to utilize all of that. We don't think that would be appropriate to utilize all of that for Johns Pass Village. And but those are the maximums under the countywide plan. The requirement is that we stay within those, that we don't do more than what they allow in their community center plan. Give you again a frame of reference. Our proposed Johns Pass Village Activity Center residential standard at an average of 19 units per acre would be about 21% of what the maximum countywide standard is. The temporary lodging standard is about 37% of what the maximum countywide standard would be. And the floor area ratio is about 64% of the maximum countywide standard. So we've tried to find that niche, if you will, where it works for what is there now and what we think may be needed in the future as things change and evolve over the years, but within the overall parameters that I've described. The next 3 chapters are basically an assessment of what some of the implications and considerations are relative to this plan being adopted. We've looked at 3 main things: transportation, the coastal high hazard area, and the planning and urban design guidelines. We'll touch on each of those quickly. As we move through this, let me get a quick drink so I don't sound worse than I do anyway. The traffic generation rate under the existing countywide plan, according to the standards that are in the countywide plan, would generate about 8,674 vehicle trips per day. That's under the current plan. We also calculated what it would generate under the current city plan. It's almost the same. It's about 100 vehicle trips per day more, about 8,700. Under the proposed future land use generation rate, there's a different number that's used for the entirety of the acreage. It's 325 vehicle trips per acre per day. And that translates to a number virtually similar to the existing numbers for the countywide plan, 8,789, about 100 vehicle trips per day more. However, the countywide plan recognizes that the whole purpose of an activity center is to emphasize the use of public transit where it's available, to provide for pedestrian access and circulation, and to encourage mixed use, which is a significant objective of the plan. And the combination of those things, the mixed use, public transit, pedestrian, bicycle access, all combine to allow for a calculation of basically 50% of the otherwise projected vehicle trips per day. So the simple way of trying to say this, as opposed to getting into a lot of traffic detail, is that virtually no increase in traffic as a result of the proposed activity center plan. And in fact, if it works as intended, over time, there could be an actual reduction of traffic if the objective of encouraging more mixed use and encouraging additional provision for public transit do in fact occur. I haven't mentioned, but will, because the specific ordinance references it, in addition to approving an amendment to the countywide plan map to put an activity center plan designation on their map, like on ours, there's also a corresponding amendment that's needed to what they call the land use strategy map. And that is to specifically recognize, as this slide does, the existing activity centers. I think by our count, there's, Andrew, about 26 activity centers throughout the county already in place. You see some of them represented here, proportionate to their size and designation. This change, which would just be a companion to the fundamental map amendment, would add Johns Pass Village as this community center, activity center to this map, another part of the countywide plan. It would be a blue dot north of Treasure Islands and south of the Madeira Beach Town Center. We've also identified some of the transportation and pedestrian access provisions, as well as some of their challenges. And we recognize there are some right-of-way challenges within Johns Pass Village in terms of any potential for expansion of vehicular traffic or even pedestrian sidewalk traffic. So there are some limitations. We've recognized those. We need to build on them and around them. The second, in the next chapter, deals with the coastal high hazard area. It is an important consideration. Johns Pass Village is entirely within the coastal high hazard area, as is the entire city and much of the barrier islands around it. So we recognize it's there. There are policies in your comprehensive plan that we have addressed and will meet, be consistent with those policies, and specifically the code provisions dealing with floodplain management of base flood elevation, freeboard, flood proofing, et cetera, all come into play and would need obviously to be met in any change that were to occur there. There are also some specific countywide plan strategies. I won't read those to you, but there are a number of them under land use, coastal high hazard area, that speak to the appropriateness or inappropriateness of what kind of development takes place in the coastal high hazard area. And more specifically, there are 9 criteria in the countywide plan that we have to address, and we have governing the criteria for redevelopment or for any increase in density or intensity in the coastal high hazard area that might occur as a result of the plan. Now, those have been addressed in some detail and is one of the tests that if and when we go forward to the county commission, ultimately we'll have to meet. We think we can. We've been very forthright in terms of what we've said about that. There's only so much we can do. One of the standards, just as an example, is ideally, if you're going to have an activity center that might increase density or intensity, you would decrease it elsewhere outside the coastal high hazard area. Well, you don't have that option in Madeira Beach. Your entire city is in the coastal high hazard area. There's no opportunity to move it out elsewhere outside the coastal high hazard area. The next chapter, included in pages 51 through 65 of the report, deal with planning and urban design principles. Again, we've tried to follow the current comprehensive plan, which outlines a number of supporting principles and policies governing the unique design features of Johns Pass Village. And that's a paramount objective of the plan. Jenny Rowan's done a nice job of compiling some photographs here in the report. If you haven't seen it, I hope you will. terms of what's there now, how that will give us the kind of the benchmark to guide what happens in the future. Again, there are six specific criteria for planning design principles in the countywide plan that we have to address. We have location, connectivity, site orientation, public realm, ground floor design and use, and transition to the neighborhoods, which is very important here because of the adjoining residential areas, particularly to the east and north. Lastly, the last chapter deals with the implementation steps. What we've tried to give to the Planning Commission here is a thumbnail sketch, I guess, of what it takes to get there if you want to go there, and we hope you do, for plan adoption and implementation. The very first step has been taken largely by the city, awaiting, I guess, final adoption. It was simply an ordinance to create a mechanism within the comprehensive plan to even do an activity center, and that ordinance has been approved at first reading, at least by the City Commission. We're at step 2 tonight, so there are several more to go. And step 2 is the initial city action to adopt the activity center plan, the plan itself by ordinance 2023-01, and the change to the map to accommodate the plan in ordinance 2023-02. I say the initial action, obviously, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to the City Commission to proceed with that or not. The next step then is to amend the countywide plan. If the City Commission approves these 2 ordinances, it would go to Forward Pinellas, be reviewed at the Planners Advisory Commission, by the Pinellas Planning Council, and ultimately by the Board of County Commissioners, sitting as the countywide planning authority. So they would, in effect, sign off on or approve your activity center plan and designation as an amendment to the countywide plan, so that the 2 are in sync. If that occurs, it then comes back to the City Commission for what the normal process is for final and second reading of both ordinances. Following that, there is another additional step to be undertaken, and that is the amendment of the city's land development code to provide some of the specifics in the zoning regulations that will put in place in specific standards relative to the policies in the plan. So the plan talks in kind of broad parameters about uses and density intensity as measured by dwelling units or temporary lodging or floor area ratio. The zoning will get down to the specifics that you're familiar with: building setback, building height, open space, all of the details that are typically in a zoning ordinance, parking, signage, that will need to be articulated and put forward in terms of a subsequent amendment to the land development code to make this plan operational. So it's a first step. All of these first 4 steps, get a plan in place, and then you implement it through the land development regulations. And after that, of course, to administer and implement the plan once those provisions are in place. So that's a thumbnail sketch of the steps. We're early in the process, and we have a ways to go, obviously. I've tried to summarize in the last couple of slides here what we mean in those ordinances. The city attorney has read them. There are attachments that describe that attach the plan report, all 68 pages, as an appendix to the an attachment to the ordinance. And the second ordinance deals with the map amendments. And effectively for Madeira Beach, this slide shows the change that would occur on your future land use map in the map amendment ordinance, from the series of categories that are there today to the area outlined for the activity center on the right. The same or corresponding amendment then would need to be made to the countywide plan, as I just explained. And the 2 maps then would be indeed consistent. The other change that would occur, as I referenced earlier, is the countywide strategy map to place Johns Pass Village on the map as a community center, activity center under the county's lexicon for that particular designation. So that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stop the summary here. Kind of, we've covered those main points about why it's important as a vital tourist destination for all of Pinellas County and the city, to try and protect what's there now, and also to enable its future evolution and revitalization in the years ahead over the next 10, 15, 20 years, and to do so in a way that gets us consistent with the countywide plan. I'll be glad to try and answer any questions that the commission has.
Very good. Thank you for the thorough presentation. Appreciate that and brought it home nicely. So I think we've got a pretty good grasp on everything. So I guess our next item up would be to ask any affected parties who want to step, who are.
Actually,
here.
first, the board gets to ask any questions.
sorry.
If they have any.
Thank you.
To the city.
Yeah, our
Staff.
planning commission members, we have any questions we want to ask regarding the plan at this point? Or Mr. Healy wants to keep talking for a little while, so. You have any questions for Mr. Healy at this point? All good? Okay,
Okay, then you're correct. We move on to
Thank
the
you.
affected parties. The affected party number one is Ms. Kathleen Berman. Is she here? Okay, Ms. Berman can step up. At this point, you're just asking any questions of Mr. Healy that you might have. Your presentation will come later. This is just ask him any questions regarding his presentation.
At this point, I'm sorry I put my name down. I am so lost and confused. And I'm not sure why we're even thinking of doing this. I'm a small town and I do like growth and I encourage it, but this seems overwhelming for Madeira Beach. And I'm just curious as to how it started and why it started and who wants it. And if it goes ahead, I'd certainly like, this town is small enough, everybody could hold hands and come to a meeting and see if this is what they really want. This is big stuff for a little town. And my stomach first flipped because I get up here and talk, but now it's flipping because I see what potentially could happen to our town. And so
okay, I'll just for clarity, if you have a question, we're going to give you all the time you want to make a presentation in a
No.
few minutes. If you have a specific question for Mr. Healy at this point, now would be the time to ask it. And then we'll call you back. And if you want
no,
to
I'm fine.
give your deal, we can do
Thank
that
you.
at that point. Okay,
Appreciate it. Thank
sorry,
you.
thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. The second affected party is Ronald Loggett.
Log it, Mr.
I'm going
Loggett.
to write that down this time in my way of spelling it. So this is just a moment for your turn to ask Mr. Healy any questions you may have. Your presentation will come later.
Yeah, my name is Ron Loggett. I'm at 13231 Gulf Lane, Madeira Beach. Got a couple questions regarding the presentation. I viewed the presentation that you initially gave to an informal presentation you gave to the Board of County Commissioners. And Commissioner Kerr had some real good questions, I thought, that he asked of you. First one was, why aren't we going ahead and doing a town meeting on this one here? And I guess the answer at that time was we had no initial plans, which means that there is a possibility for a town meeting to try to correct some of the misconceptions that like this lady had and questions.
Want me to respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
If you'd like.
I think the initial answer was that the city staff attempted a year and a half ago, approximately, by holding a couple of workshops and doing an online survey to get input, looking at alternative approaches, and felt based on that input that this was the direction that they would pursue. When we discussed it with the town commission, the city commission, I'm sorry, I think it was their feeling that we had done that and it was time to move forward to the public hearing process.
So it was done a year and a half ago?
My understanding was it was done in 2021. I did not participate in that, so I can't speak definitively.
What has changed? on
Is
that
Linda on our meeting? Linda, are you out there? Nope, doesn't sound like it. Okay, she could probably define better when the whole process started.
And what has changed from that presentation to this presentation?
I can actually speak to when the process started. The process started in fall of 2020 when we discovered incompatibilities with our comprehensive plan and the countywide plan. And in summer of 2021 is when we did those public workshops, one here for residents and one down in Johns Pass for business owners down there. This also has gone to a BOC workshop and to at least one few planning commission meetings. So we have tried to get as much like public input over the last 2 years. And that's why we've scaled this down considerably and developed the character districts to protect the residential areas to make sure that they stay nice and quiet and not negatively impacted by any future development.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Was this presentation given at that time with the same amount of the same amount of, there is
Actually, less floor area ratio. We've reduced the amount of density and intensity we proposed compared to what was shown in 2021 based off of feedback from the community and from Forward Pinellas.
Yeah, the original went all the way from end to end, right? From Johns Pass all the way up to Madeira Way. Along
That
Gulf
was
Boulevard.
one of the options we showed the public, and we received negative feedback or even concerns about that. So we reduced the scale of it to focus it around the area of Johns Pass.
but it wasn't the same presentation.
Well, no, it wouldn't have been because it was
Yeah.
covering a much larger
And,
area.
and that's what I'm saying. This should be made available to a town meeting, in my opinion. Okay?
This
Oh.
version has gone to, this year has gone to Planning Commission and BOC workshop meeting.
Yeah.
Um,
You talked about a survey. Who did the survey? And who wrote the survey?
City staff wrote the survey, and we have a record of it. I think how many respondents, I think it was like
55.
100.
155 responded.
Yep.
Now, the
Okay.
questions that were put there were not kind of, they were, I forgot what the term is in marketing and research, but you gave them a choice of 4, 5, 6, or 7 or above heights of building. Why didn't you give them a choice of 1, 2, and 3?
Because that by right in the R3 zoning district, you're allowed to do, was it like 44 feet?
It's 44
above-
feet.
Above design flood elevation. So we wouldn't want to, that would be a taking to reduce what legally is the allowed height currently.
Yeah, I wish you'd asked the people that responded with 4, 5, or 6 if they would like that next to their residence.
Well, currently in the R3 zoning district, which covers the resort facilities medium along like Gulf Lane, you can do 44 feet up to base above design flood elevation by right.
This is quite an increase in density, isn't it?
No, I don't think that's correct, sir. The proposed residential density is virtually what it is now, both in the city plan and on the ground. The floor area ratio does increase. And as we pointed out earlier, one of the reasons it does is because, in fact, in each of the character districts, there are existing situations where it exceeds the current standard. In addition to which, the hope is that we will encourage, by having the potential for additional floor area, more mixed use. And I failed to say and need to reiterate, I don't know that we emphasized that at the workshop for the Planning Commission, that it's a dual standard. So that not only do you have to meet the standard for the maximum number of dwelling units or temporary lodging units, you have to meet the standard for the floor area ratio. So you can't have just the maximum number of residential units, for example, no matter.
And the height restrictions.
And no matter how, no matter how big the building gets, you're constrained by both components of the density and intensity standard.
Okay. Commissioner also asked you to provide some examples of the areas. I know you provided an example of this someplace on Seminole Boulevard. Are you providing any examples of the area affected under this as far as the 0.55 FAR?
Yes, sir. We did the map that you see up there right now that Andrew's gone back.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the building itself. You had a building in Seminole Boulevard that you showed. the 0.55 at that meeting?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Do you have any in the affected area like that, in the transitional area, in the areas that you described?
So, sir, this map right here has the floor area ratios of specific buildings within the activity center
But
that currently are built on the ground.
I'm talking about a picture of, like you provided in the initial presentation, which was a garage somewhere on Seminole Boulevard.
I mean, most of the existing buildings on Village Boulevard have a high floor area ratio because they cover most of the lot. So if you have a building that covers most of the lot, that can lead to a higher floor area ratio.
Yeah.
Because it, like.
Okay,
But
Commissioner.
to answer your question, sir, no, there's not a picture there.
Okay, I think Commissioner Kerr had asked for a couple of examples of that 0.55. I mean, based on my notes here on the activity center. I just wondered whether you did it. The other thing was, he asked, what is the benefit to the resident in these areas? I have not seen any presentation to show you the benefits to the residents.
We think the benefit is by differentiating among the character districts, number one, recognizing the existing residential use and limiting any mixed use or the percentage of mixed use that could occur in relationship to those existing residential uses, and the specific standards about any increase in residential use, which could portend or suggest that it would be desirable to buy up a bunch of property and build a bunch more units, to be direct.
Yeah, but I don't think that much property is available, do you? In the area,
Well, that was one of our points, that the average lot size is
40 feet.
about quarter of an acre,
Yeah.
about 10,000 square feet. So that is the point with respect to the density standard.
Okay. I'll wait for my
Thank you.
presentation after.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
The next affected party is Joanne Claben. Is Ms. Claben here? Okay, this is your,
Unsure between the questioning of him and comments.
right, so at this point, it's just questions
Questions,
regarding
please.
Mr. Healy's presentation.
So Joanne Claben, Gulf Lane at 133rd. My question about your traffic comment. You said traffic should remain the same if
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is passed.
Yes.
And I want to understand, how did that get determined? Because have you ever been here during a spring break, January, February, March, April? There is no way increasing density and putting in a hotel and doing all the things that are gonna happen with this activity center, that traffic is gonna be anything less than a nightmare, because it's currently already a nightmare during January, February, March, April. I mean, I have to leave 20 minutes earlier than I already leave for work just to go 1 mile during season. How can it not change? What is your?
Ma'am, are you asking me a question or
Yes,
making a statement?
sorry.
You want to know how it stays
How
the
did you
same?
determine it? Yes.
Because there are specific standards for projecting traffic based on the plan categories. The current plan categories each have their own distinct traffic generation rate, it's called, from the traffic engineer's manual in the Department of Transportation. Shows the number of acres in each plan category currently, the traffic generation rate for that plan category. For example, residential medium, it's 96 vehicle trips per day per acre. For resort, it's 279 vehicle trips per day. Those total up for the current plan, 8,674 vehicle trips. For the activity center plan, the designated.
I'll stop you. You don't have to go through all the numbers again, because you're basically gonna repeat the numbers you repeated before, but my
Yes.
statement is, that's a number on a piece of paper. Is it really practical? Have you been here? Have you actually been
Yes.
in Johns Pass during
Yes, I have. I've been in Pinellas County since 1977.
spring break?
Yes,
But I'm
ma'am.
saying, so have you ever tried making a left
I
out
was-
of Gulf Lane and made a left on Gulf Boulevard?
I have not done that, no.
Okay, that's all, that's my only question is, I don't see how these numbers on paper calculate into the real world, I guess.
We're required to use Department of Transportation and the vehicle trips, the generation rate from the countywide plan. And that's what they tell us.
Okay, I'll save the rest of my.
Thank you very much.
The next affected party is Robert Bello. Is Mr. Bello here? Okay. The next affected party, Thomas Edwards. Mr. Edwards?
Thomas Edwards, been a resident here in a protected address for over 40 years. Born and raised in Pinellas County, very familiar with Johns Pass and the area. My wife's grandparents used to own the Niptide cottages just on the other side of the bridge here. So we're very familiar with the area. Mr. Healy, Andrew gave me a copy of the presentation for tonight, and looking through it here, on page 4, it talks about John Pass having been underutilized. Can you explain how it's been underutilized? Since this is through the report here, the second or third most popular tourist present destination. So I'm just trying to find out how it's underutilized. Yes, sir. It's on page 4. First paragraph.
Bear with me, I'll turn to that.
It's about 2/3 of the way down. Says Johns Pass Village, while this area is recognized as an important tourist destination for the Tampa Bay metro area, has been underutilized.
I think that speaks to the issue of the current vacancies. There's vacant property within there. There's certainly property that's been developed there decades ago under different standards, different market, different needs. And that today those standards are somewhat, those needs and those standards would be somewhat different. That there is an opportunity to revitalize and improve what has been there and evolved over the years. That it hasn't reached its full potential, I think is what it's attempting to say.
So Johns Pass Village, see if you agree with me on this, is the characteristics of the village is it's small, intimate, walkable, unique, in that we have waterfront shopping and restaurants there, designed for social interaction, and it's locally driven with a highly visited tourist site. Would you say that would
I think that's
match the description what we have?
well said, yes, sir.
Thank you. So I kind of like to walk through each of the areas to try and make some sense of this, if you don't mind. So if we were to start with the boardwalk area, and I know that it has 0 lodging for that area, and you are proposing a floor area ratio of 1.5 to 2.0, correct? So as my understanding is, because I've seen your pictures of what a 1 is, it would either cover the entire amount of property, or if it covered half the property, it would be 2-story. Is that correct? For 50%, for 0.50.
Yes.
So the buildings that are on the boardwalk are 2-story, and I understand that they pretty much have 0 lot lines between the buildings, the different businesses there. So when we say, what is one of the buildings that's only 2 stories there and they have parking underneath, is that considered a 1 or is that considered a 0.5 for that type of building?
Not sure I understood the question.
Well, I'm talking about the existing buildings that are right on the boardwalk there, where the boardwalk and the people can go in directly from the boardwalk to the business. So the businesses that are there, are they a 0.5 FAR or are they a 1 FAR? I'm just trying to understand the difference.
So your description was that there's no building on the ground floor, it's parking, and there's 1 story above that?
Yes.
Okay, that would be an FAR of 1.
That would be a 1.
If it covers the entire lot, as you've described.
Okay. And so, and then if there was a building underneath, a restaurant was something on the ground floor, and then something up on the second floor, is that considered a 1 also, or 2?
That would be a 2.
It'd be a 2. Okay, so then it would sound like that throughout Johns Pass, in the different areas in the traditional and everything, that everything is pretty much a two there because everything is pretty much two-story except for a couple buildings like the parking garage, Bubba Gump's, maybe the John's Pass Hotel. Those are the only things that I can think are the three. Correct?
So garage space doesn't count towards floor area ratio. Floor area.
But just take Bubba Gump's then and John's Pass Hotel. Those are about the only two that are actually 3 stories. So that would be a 2.5, then I take it.
Well, you're asking us to make assumptions. I don't know what the floor area is of that specific building. I don't want to answer something that I can't speak to.
Well, it's 3 stories. That's all I'm saying is that would be a 2.5 then is what I'm understanding. If I'm understanding what FAR is, I'm just trying to make it simple.
It wouldn't
for us to
necessarily be a
understand.
2.5 because you have to look at the overall lot dimensions to see how much the building is covering, right?
I got
So we're
that.
not assuming, I don't know
But
the
everything,
exact
but
lot
everything
lines
in
of
John's
Bubba Gump's.
Pass is
very
next to
compact.
each other. Yeah,
Sure.
they're covering the entire amount of their floor space.
Correct.
So their property space, I should say.
In some cases, like a townhome.
Yeah,
You know, they're
but
building.
yeah, exactly. So it looks like throughout John's Pass with all the buildings along Village Boulevard, they're all 2-story there, that those would be a 2. Or a 1, I'm sorry, be a 1.5 or 2.
Well, not necessarily. They may cover from side to side, but they don't cover from front to back. Because those lots go from Pelican Lane out to Village Boulevard for using your example of the ones along Village Boulevard, right? So there's parking areas in the back for the
Where there's a small area of
staff and
parking,
whatever.
right.
So you've got the width of the lot and whatever that depth is, some of them are 2 or 3 cars deep. So
Does
you,
it go to the parking lot or does it go right to where the sidewalk would be?
well, the floor area ratio goes to whatever the lot line is.
Right.
And we'd have to look at each individual lot to see where that is. But your setbacks count, you own that land, you just can't build on it, right? If it's in a setback. So it would go basically to
Correct.
the edge of the street out to the public domain street on Village Boulevard from Pelican Lane, using your example of Village Boulevard, from Pelican Lane out to Village Boulevard
Correct.
or wherever that lot ends,
Right.
right?
Well,
Wherever the
it
city
wouldn't extend,
property-
it wouldn't extend out to the sidewalk unless they own the sidewalk. then.
Correct, to wherever that ends. So, but
Right.
you know, if there's an overhang, that's not building area, right?
Right.
So if you have space in front of your building that's owned by you, but there's a boardwalk in front of it, that's not covered land. So that doesn't calculate in the floor area ratio. So you'd have to really look at each individual building and see exactly their lot size to compare. It's really not fair to
Yeah.
say, you know, is this building a 2.5? Because we,
Well, the question is that if we had a hurricane and those buildings were wiped out, and would not a 2 seem to be the size that we would need to replace those existing buildings? You know, why is it proposed that, you know, it could be more?
More in what
Well,
sense?
right now, you're recommending what, a 1 point for the
5.
boardwalk, a 1 or a
1.5.
1.5?
1.5 to 2 with the bonus.
Okay.
So they get the 1.5 as a matter of right.
So with the bonus, you know, you're talking about a development agreement. Is a development agreement synonymous with planned development or are they 2 separate things?
2 separate things.
So development agreement. And so what would have to occur in a development agreement to get a bonus?
Well, they'd have to
Typically.
make the case to the city that A, it was necessary or beneficial somehow to the Johns Pass Village area in order to do that. And what it is that is going to occur as a result of that, what is adjoining it that it might be compatible or incompatible with. And there's 2 public hearings, one by the Planning Commission and one by the City Commission on the development agreement that would enumerate the specifics. Maybe they need more than 1.5, but they don't need 2. Maybe it ends up being 1.75 is the agreed upon middle ground in order to allow them reasonable use of the property in some way that's beneficial to the overall development of the activity center.
So you don't need a public hearing like you do with a planned development then?
No, yes, sir, you do. There's 2.
Well, I'm
I'll
talking
defer to the
about-
city
you're-
attorney, but I think
coming to the
there are
plan-
2 public hearings
You're coming
required.
to the planning commission and you're going to the board of commissioners, but in a plan development, there's also a separate public hearing where the developer comes in and speaks to the public, but I'm hearing that in the development agreement, you wouldn't have that type of public.
No, sir,
presentation.
it is a public hearing with notice. Reading of the of the provision that would approve or not the development agreement? It is to my understanding, and if
Well-
I'm incorrect, I'll have the city attorney correct me.
Well, I guess the question is, if it comes before the planning commission, the public would only have 3 minutes to speak. They wouldn't have chance, opportunity to interact with the person that wants to do that development agreement to get more questions answered. That's what I'm asking. Where you go to a planned development, you have a separate meeting where you have the developer there, the public comes in and they can ask questions back and forth to get their questions answered to understand why
I
it's
see what you
doing.
mean. Separate
But
and
here,
apart
we're
from the
we're
public
only limited to a 3-minute presentation or questions. So that's what I'm trying to find
I don't
out.
know the
Let me ask
procedural
our city
rules.
attorney for clarification. Are there affected parties in the same manner? So
Yes, it'd be a quasi judicial hearing, public hearing.
Yeah.
So you could apply to be an affected party like you did today and be able to ask questions. If you chose just to make public comment, you could do
So if
that.
something occurs in Johns Pass Village, you have to be within 300 feet. Otherwise, if you're in one of the transitional areas and you're not within 300 feet, you wouldn't have the opportunity to do that. Is that correct?
Well, that's a good definition of affected party. The 300-foot notice is, 300 foot, you're gonna get notice of the hearing. So if you live outside that 300 foot, you might not get a notice in the mail, but there will be public notice of the hearing. And if you learn of it, even though you don't live within 300 feet, you still have the right to come and apply to be an affected party like you did today.
So you don't have 3-minute comment.
And not if you're accepted as an affected party. That'd be like what you're doing today.
But if you're outside the 300 feet.
No. Two different things.
Right, exactly. I know that. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. So I'm an interested party.
Right.
But I'm only going to be entitled to 3 minutes.
Not necessarily. The way your code in this city is written, you can do your notice of intent to be an affected party, even if you don't live within 300 feet of Johns Pass. If we're taking your scenario, something's going to happen in Johns Pass after the activity center is approved, should it be approved. You don't live within 300 feet, so you're not going to get notice in the mail of that hearing necessarily, but you still could get notice of it because it's publicly noticed in the paper on City Hall's doors. Maybe not on the door, but somewhere at City Hall, you'll get notice of it. You still have the right to come like you did tonight and request to speak.
Okay.
Whether-
As an affected party.
You can apply for it.
And the only
right?
reason I'm asking is because Tom Trask has ruled differently in previous
Well,
presentations,
it-
that if you weren't within 300 feet, you could not be an affected party. So I'm just trying to clarify some issues here.
It's the definition of affected party. There is a definition for it and it's up to the board to make that determination. Ultimately, you could come request it and the board's going to ultimately make that decision. So you're correct. The board's going to ultimately make the decision if you
Right.
qualify, and that would be between your statement to the board and what they felt your interest was in the development agreement that's being discussed. So it's not a given. Even tonight is not necessarily a given because someone could challenge you as an affected party and the board determined that you're not. So it's not a given for anybody, but you have the right to come ask.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
So there's a planned hotel that's proposed down there too with a parking garage. And you've seen the large piece of property down there. You've walked the area and seen the large piece of property that's
We're
on,
talking
well,
about specifics.
it's been,
I've walked the area, yes.
well, it's between Fisherman's Alley and 129th Avenue. And from East Lane, I think it is, East End Lane, thank you. And where Pelican Place would be. It's about an acre.
I know where you're
And
referencing.
so it's recommended for a 3.0 FAR on that. And so if they cover the entire lot, that would be, because an acre is about 90% of a football field, trying to imagine. I had to do some research. I don't remember what acres were. But an acre is about 90% of an actual football field.
43,560 square feet.
Right. So if they didn't cover all of that, they could actually build up 6 stories there.
Again, you're hypothesizing a number of things. First of all,
well,
which character district is it in, the property you're referring to?
It's in the commercial core.
Commercial core. Okay.
Thank you.
The maximum standard is 2.5 and only with the bonus, meaning pursuant to a development agreement, it could go to 3.
Right. And so it could be 6 stories tall.
How do you derive that?
Because
You're assuming the first 3 floors are parking, is that?
no, this is a separate parking garage. I'm saying, depending upon where they're, how they build the building, they could go up 6 stories. If
there are height limits there,
floor
too.
acre, if they took up only half the lot, you know, they got an acre, if they only took up half an acre, they could go up 6 stories.
Sir, number one, the height limitations remain to be established in the zoning. Okay, they are not part of the plan. So for me to speak to how high they could go or might go, or whatever it is you're talking about would go, is,
Well, that's
I can't
my
answer that.
question. Yeah, well, because a 3-0, a 3 FAR means that the buildings, yeah.
If they built on
Zoning is
the
gonna
entire
come,
of the-
zoning is gonna come in.
if they built on the
6
entirety of the lot,
6 months or so. I got that. Yes. No, not if they bought, if they only put on half the lot, theoretically, they
that
can go
would
up 6
require
stories.
them, I guess, to go 6 stories to get a 3.0. Now,
And
could they
that's-
go 6 stories? I don't know. Would you
that's-
approve a 3.0? I don't know. So you're speculating about
Well,
what might
but
conceivably
we're
happen.
asking them to go ahead and approve your plan, which allows to go up to a 3-0.
No,
and
it
that's what I'm
does not as a matter of right. It does not, sir. It would allow them to have,
With
a
2.5
2.5.
or 3 with a development agreement.
yes, sir.
I know I'm reading what you
That's
said
correct.
here. So what I'm hearing when I talk to residents and I talk to tourists that come and stay near me, they like John's Pass the way it is. They don't want to see this real tall structure there that is incompatible with the other area. So that's what I'm wondering is why we aren't lowering the FAR value. What is the reason for a FAR value of that high when it could be lower?
You're
Such as a 2 or 2.5. That's all for that particular commercial district.
have to understand there's a relationship between the number of units that are permitted, whether it be residential or temporary lodging, and how much floor area it will take to accomplish that, particularly if it's a mixed use. And we're not saying that the type of building you're talking about, because they want to get to a floor area ratio of 3, would be allowed to go to 6 stories or any other height. It's the floor area ratio that would set the maximum, as well as the number of units. And depending on what the other provisions are for setback. For example, if what you're describing,
Here's a picture of a hotel.
I have not seen that. I don't know what you're speaking of.
All right, hold on. We're gonna.
Hold on. No,
keep it to
So this is showing a 6-story hotel there with a 3-story parking garage on another piece of property there. And so I'm just trying to understand why we're proposing such a tall building in an area that typically has only 2-story buildings. That's why I don't understand. And this looks like a really big building in that area, which is only 2 stories. So I'm trying to understand why you're proposing that it can go as high as a 3 FAR.
Okay, I'm gonna try and rein this in. I think we've registered your distaste for the plan at this point. And without being argumentative back and forth, let's keep it to a question. And we're, obviously, this plan is not centered around any one particular project for or against. And that's a what if. I mean, we could what if until, next Christmas.
Well, I beg to differ because there's a development agreement that has already been drafted, proposed by the city with the city and a developer for a 3-story parking garage there on one of the lots for 294 parking places. So it's not hypothetical. The other part of this is also the units per acre, where they're increasing the density for, that you could go up to 100 units per acre, which seems excessive. And so, I mean.
Again, that's with a development agreement, understandable. So the temporary lodging facilities would be 75 units an acre.
So the other thing during your presentation, you said we got considerable feedback from the survey. The survey consisted of 169 people, 169 residents responded. That is not statistically, so how can 169 in a population of 4,300 go ahead and be statistically significant when you say it's a considerable feedback for 169 people?
I wasn't speaking to it being statistically significant.
No, but you said it was considerable feedback. Considerable
Right.
feedback does not sound like,
You can only record the feedback you get. The others did not respond. I can't fix that. The ones that did respond, we appreciated their input and tried to reflect it.
so the question is because this is a very complicated issue, one of the commissioners also thought maybe we should go ahead and have some more feedback, have a better have another public session to go ahead and go through this plan. There's no rush to get this done by a certain time period, is there? Right, so because the Pinellas Forwarder Group meets on a monthly basis, and so there's no rush to have to get this done by a certain time period or anything like that. We're not being pushed by the state or the county, so you can see how people are confused over these particular issues. So would you recommend having another public hearing so that the public can better understand?
That's a decision for the planning commission and ultimately the city commission to make, whatever
Okay.
they choose to do in that regard.
So in the map there, if you could put the map back up, Andrew. I had a question. So at 129th Avenue, if you look at that, yeah, come down and go out, how come all 129th Avenue wasn't put in this plan that goes eastbound there, that tail that goes out into the water? And the same with 131st, the tail isn't included in that. Why was that not included? In
Those areas have the future land use of residential medium and the zoning category of R2, and they were compatible with what's built on the ground there. And they're primarily resident, like low density multifamily mixed with single family.
Right. Everything there is either single or two-story. There's only about 5 houses going up to 129th that are 3 stories. So when you're talking about a FAR, just going back, if you're required to have built above the flood level, is second and third floor, is that considered typically like a 1.5? If you have to build the flood level, or would that be 1? So I'm just a general question on that.
Again, it depends on the configuration of the lot. How big is the lot? How deep is it? What are the setbacks? Does it cover the whole lot or doesn't it? It all goes into the determination.
You obviously, you can't build to a 1 on a single level because that would cover the entire lot.
And would
Right. So
Right.
you've got setbacks to consider. So if you were to build it to a full 1 FAR, you would have to go to 2 stories.
Okay.
And you have to, also other things that are considered are the impervious surface ratio. That has to be part of the mix too. So there's a lot more to this. What this plan is kind of a big overlay. And then if and when it gets approved, then the details get hammered out as to impervious surface ratios, the height restrictions, which are mostly already in place. And those will then further constrict what can be built. So can the 6-story building be built there? The way the height restrictions are now, no, they can't.
Unless they get a planned development. So the transitional area stopped at 133rd. Why didn't it go up to 135th on Gulf Lane?
Andrew, maybe you can help me with this, but I think that's the extent of the resort district, which was basically what we were trying to reflect there and differentiate between the resort district proper and the area that begins to transition north of that.
And those places like Madeira Bay are about, or they're within walking distance of Johns Pass. So you do have pedestrians walking from that area. Going further up Gulf Boulevard, those areas are less connected to Johns Pass, and they also are less.
Well, everyone walks on Gulf Lane and they'll go from 135th all the way down to Johns Pass. So I was just curious why you didn't include those additional 2 blocks.
They're less in, they have less intense development and
Less proximate to the core area of the village.
I'd like to move on to your traffic plan. So I know you're using book numbers. Do you have any numbers where they actually did traffic counts coming in or out of Johns Pass Village, 129th, 131st, and Village Boulevard? Do we have any traffic counts?
We include in the plan itself, we have the annual average daily traffic counts
Right,
that
I know
FDOT
that, yeah.
takes
But
every year.
you only had, but you don't say where those traffic counts were done. I mean, I've.
Yeah, they're on this.
And I've seen the the traffic count tubes on the road there where they're counting traffic, but I hadn't seen any going in or out of Johns Pass Village.
This was just on the section of Gulf Boulevard that goes through Johns Pass. I trying to think of the exact length of the segment. I'd have to pull up FDOT's annual average daily traffic count map to show,
There's
but it's the
two-
segment that goes through it.
Yeah,
And
there's
it's
two
about
sections.
2.95 miles.
Correct, yeah. And they've got the average AADT there, the volume of traffic, the capacity, the level of service. What's interesting about that table is that the volume to capacity ratio is around 50%, less than one of the sections, 54% in the other, would suggest there's plenty of capacity on Gulf Boulevard.
Yeah, and I mean, one of our goals with this special area plan would be to improve the walkability of Johns Pass, so someone staying down there doesn't have to get in their car to drive somewhere, so they can actually just walk from whatever they're staying at, like hotel or vacation rental, and go to the activities or destination they want to do, or where they want to eat restaurant wise. So that's one of the reasons why with the traffic generation rates with the activity centers, they take into account that idea of that internal circulation of like pedestrians within the activity center.
The only reason I'm also asking about traffic and parking issues is, we've experienced this in the city already. You can use Caddy's as an example where they thought 40% of the local residents would walk up there, and that didn't happen. You had people coming in, we had parking going into the residential areas. So, I just don't know if the numbers that you have there are going to be accurate, because you don't have enough traffic information where you did traffic counts at those particular areas to get it over several months, or, you do it quarterly or something like that. So you get those traffic counts that would help you with this type of figuring. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The last affected party is James Levine.
I'm sorry about that before, but I was trying to clarify where you could find
no
that
worries.
information.
Thank you.
Are you aware that this was attempted previously back in 2019 or a different administration? I think the same proposals were up a couple of years ago.
I'm not.
Okay. And it kind of answered my other question. Are you aware of the article from Tampa Bay Times published August 31st, 2018?
So I did read that Tampa
I'm
Bay.
asking David.
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay, if you would, please look it up, because it calls for a 6-story, 78 suite, 297 parking garage. And I think that was proposed before it was shut down, excuse me, shut down the last time. Tampa Bay Times, August 31st, 2018. If you just put in Johns Pass and put in that date. I did share that with Andrew. That's pretty much, I just want to know if you were aware of that article, because it appears the development you're asking for is right in that, what's it, 2.8 acres, 15 lots is the amount that company owned. I think they've sold it since then. But you do definitely need to be aware of that situation
I'll be happy
before
to read
any of
that.
this proceeds. That's it. Thanks.
Okay,
That is all the affected parties.
those are all the affected parties.
So at this point, it would be time for the affected parties to be able to have their turn to present any testimony information they would like to present to the board. If you're
Okay.
ready for that, I'll start the roll call.
Let her rip.
Okay, the first affected party is Kathleen Berman. If Ms. Berman has any presentation she'd like to make. Okay. Next is Mr. Leggett. Did I get it right that time? Okay.
Again, thank you. My name is again Ron Loggett. I'm at 13231 Gulf Lane. I've been there. I started buying the house in 1976 and took ownership back in 1981. One of the issues I want to talk to is on this proposal is I can talk a lot better to the transitional area that's defined west of Gulf Boulevard from 131st to 133rd. I don't know why that particular area has been included, because what you have in that particular area is you have, if I counted correctly, 8 40-foot wide lots. You've got 3 80-foot lots, one which is the city parking lot. One is my neighbor next door, which is multifamily, most are single family. And one was a condo that was built in 1981 that consists of 6 stories with 2 units per story. It's been there for quite a while. Also on that piece of property, you've got Barefoot Beach Resort. They've got 2 parcels. The first parcel they've got which is west of Gulf Lane. They've got 3-story hotel with about 34 rooms. And on the cross from Gulf Lane, on the east side of Gulf Lane, they've got a 5-story hotel with 30 rooms. Again, I just see this area as single family, multifamily, in addition to what's there now with the condo and Barefoot Beach. Why is the density, potential for density being increased? I don't understand that. Okay. I'm also in favor of having a meeting to explain in more detail to the general public as to what happened. This happened a long time ago. There's a lot of confusion, I mean, still on my part, and I viewed that presentation 2 different times, 3 different times. Maybe I'm slow, and I viewed Mr. Healy's presentation now, and I think I understand it. But I'm not sure whether everybody else understands what's happening here and what the potential is. And I still don't understand the total benefits to the community, to the neighbors. I think the neighbors need more input. I'm sure the business community would like this, especially the developers, because they're going to be building up, and that's what they're in for, to make money. And I'm not against growth, but I'm against controlled growth. Something that makes sense for the city. You know, I'm on VRBO and been there about maybe 10 years, even though I've owned the house a lot longer than that. I've got over 95 guests that respond with a positive 5-star rating. And the reason they do for that is they love the area. They love Johns Pass the way it is now. It's a great attraction. Clearwater doesn't have it, St. Pete Beach doesn't have it, Treasure Island doesn't have it, but we do. And it does need to be preserved. And if something happens to it, man, let's build it up the same way it is now. Let's not change it, okay? Because it is a big attraction. We have a lot of events there, and people do love that. You know, people come and they tell me, so, you know, what I like about the area, I can walk along the beach, and it's not like Clearwater Beach, where I've got to bump against people all the time. I've got a lot of space here. The beaches are nice. The groins work fantastic. And we understand we're going to put more groins in. That's great. Don't make it Clearwater Beach. Don't make it all concrete, you know? The people don't want that. The neighbors don't want that. The people visiting here do not want that at all. Bottom line, I think it still increases density, but with potential for density more. And I don't see, if you include the area that I described, which is west of Gulf Boulevard, Gulf Lane between 131st and 132nd as transitional, I don't know what I'm transitioning to. Okay? I'd like to have more clarification on that, what I'm going to transition to. I know Mr. Healy put a lot of time in this, put a lot of time and effort in this. And he gets beat up with a lot of questions, and I appreciate that, okay? But then that's why he gets paid the big bucks. Right, Mr. Healy? Again, thank you for the time, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett.
At this point, if the board has any questions of Mr. Loggett. Did I get it? Loggett? If the board has any questions of Mr. Loggett, this is the time to do so.
Anyone? Questions for Mr. Leggett?
Okay.
Thank you.
Hold on, not yet. And now city staff has an opportunity also to question if they have any questions of Mr. Loggett. Mr. Healy, this is your chance to ask any questions of Mr. Loggett if you have any.
No, I have no questions.
Thank you.
I understand so much.
Right.
Thank you,
then
sir.
My shoes?
You're done now. Thank you. Next affected party is Joanne Claben. Ms. Claben, this is your chance to present.
Well, Ron did a great job and he brought up a couple of my things I was gonna talk about. It was mainly, I would go even further down than he was gonna go. You know, when you look at the west side, strictly talking west side now of Gulf Boulevard, our lane is primarily single and multifamily residential, you know, other than Barefoot. It's families, it's narrow, it's a little tiny, it's just a special place in Madeira Beach. I don't, it's the last of the, you know, residential on the beach areas that's not overwhelmingly built big condos. And by taking Mr. Healy's map there, you know, Andrew, you had the one that showed the green and yellow on our side, on the west side. Not that map, you know which one I'm talking about? It shows the single, yeah, it was the green and, yeah. No, keep going back. It shows the primarily single and multifamily, yeah, right there. Residential, it goes all the way from the Johns Pass parking lot, which is really the only part of Johns Pass. And the rest of it's single and multifamily residential. Which in theory, if you look at residential medium, if you go back in, you know, the finger back there, that's a 0.5 FAR. I honestly don't get the whole FAR thing. I'll be honest about that. It is confusing for the average homeowner. I know my neighbors didn't want to come. They didn't understand this. Changing that to resort, which is this map, that blue, all those teal blue colors, changes it to resort as a 1 to 2 FAR. Which means somebody could, I know you said there aren't a lot of pieces of property for sale, but someone could come in and buy those cute little single low-level condo or family homes, knock them down and put in something that's a 1 or a 2, as opposed to the 0.5s. So I don't want to see the spirit of Gulf Lane change. I don't think it really can handle change. I really was concerned about traffic. I'm not going to get back into it again, but for anyone who lives here and lives down in the Johns Pass area, traffic is a nightmare during season. Thank you, Michael. He's nodding. Michael's nodding. Put that on the record, Michael.
I live on 131st.
So you know, it's a nightmare. And by including up to 133rd, I don't know if that changed his numbers where he said the numbers didn't change. Did if that area expanded, maybe his numbers change because we're looking at a bigger area for the ratio. So the other thing I'm concerned about is, I know the hotel, the proposed hotel is not supposed to be part of the discussion, but it is part of the changing of the zone and the FAR and everything else. Our Johns Pass area, the tourists that we're attracting, it's changed in the last 3-4 years. Anybody who goes down there, there's more vandalism, there's more break-ins, we don't have snowbirds and families coming anymore primarily. There's a lot of college age kids, there's a lot of spring breakers. Last year, there was a group of 100 to 150 plus kids that all came from the same town, came into John's Pass, and the police had to be called multiple times. They broke into the Madeira North, they broke into the Chambray, they were in our yards, they were, jumping in our pools. The police couldn't handle it. And now we're talking about expanding it even bigger and changing the area. So I ask you just to really consider when this gets approved or not approved or revised, changing the limits, to consider that. It's a whole different place than it was a few years ago. And I think it could be made worse by what you're thinking about doing. So I'll let Bob talk next. And when Bob tells you about what's happened in our area, I live next door to him. So everything he's gonna tell you is true. I have seen it on my cameras, he's seen it on his cameras, and it's crazy. So.
Yes, this is, if Ms. Claiborne is done, this is the board's chance to ask any questions of her if you have any. And if not, city staff, if they have any questions.
No, I just make maybe two quick comments, Ms. Claiborne. One, you said you don't know why that area is included, nor it's now part of the resort category. We could continue to leave it in that resort category, but we saw a distinction we're trying to provide for in terms of a step down and recognition that it transitions from the core of the activity center to areas north of it. And it provides for a lesser floor area ratio than does the resort. It provides for lesser temporary lodging number of units than does the resort category. So in fact, there is a distinction we've tried to recognize. The other thing is it goes back partly to what you said and what Mr. Loggett said. One of the issues is people want to speak about they like it the way it is. Well, all of what's there probably couldn't be rebuilt under today's standards. And that's part of the issue. Can it, if someone's home is lost or someone's small multifamily building is lost, can it be rebuilt in that same form? The likely answer is maybe under the criteria for non-conforming use, the same amount of area can be there, providing it doesn't step outside the existing footprint or provide for a different layout. And in today's world, could they afford to replace that? Is the investment going to work based on what was there 10 years, 20, 30 years ago? So we're trying to look ahead in terms of what might be necessary for the people that in fact own that property to stay where they want to be, should there be an unfortunate circumstance that would cause them to have to make a change, or on the other side of that, to want to make a change that would upgrade, improve, revitalize what they have to maybe a more current standard within the framework of the code. So those two things, we're trying to recognize both aspects of that.
Am I allowed to question him back?
Mr. Noble has a question as well.
You can go ahead and
Well, because you said that it's transitional, so it's a step down from resort, but yet on the picture, it's all labeled resort. It's not labeled, it's transitional on that multicolored map. Right, but when you look at the one you sent me, the future use one, because Andrew sent me all this paperwork and I have to say it was 79 pages of confusion.
I apologize about that. So the first map I was showing is that this is what's existing. This is what's in our comprehensive plan currently that's been approved, that's active right now. So with a development agreement, so the Johns Pass resort area and the transitional area, they're all in resort facilities medium, which if you get a development agreement and do a PD, you can have up to a 2 floor area ratio depending on how much acreage you have. And you can have a temporary lodging up to, and this is in our comp plan right now for this area. What we're proposing, so the residential density,
It's the same.
pretty much just, and we're not actually increasing, the temporary lodging is still staying at 75 as the maximum like it was how it is now. And the floor area ratio is not an increase. And then we also added guardrails by requiring the development agreement. So the developer would need to do public meetings to reduce community impact and would need to provide a benefit to the community, whether that's public space improvements or potentially transportation improvements like crosswalk improvement or a stoplight. That's the reason why we want to make sure that new development doesn't hurt the community. And that's how we set up the plan to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I've looked at other plans, like in Clearwater Beach, and one of the things we did while crafting this was to avoid doing anything like that. Like we definitely, Clearwater Beach has, in their plan, has significantly more density and intensity proposed, which would be completely out of character for Madeira Beach. And that's why with our plan, we set it up differently to make sure there's community input and to make sure it's scaled down to fit with the existing buildings. And the challenge with the existing stuff there currently, a lot of it actually has a high floor area ratio and a relatively high density, like because of either like it was built like in the 70s before our existing zoning went into place, or it's just a very small lot. It's kind of tough to show a breakdown. I have the spreadsheet that breaks down by parcel for each building. But that for the most part with the transitional and Johns Pass Resort areas, they're staying pretty similar to what they are now in our comprehensive plan. I apologize for the confusion because there's so many layers to it. It's kind of tough to.
It is confusing.
explain.
I will say
Yeah.
that to all of you. The average person coming in, like the average homeowner, this whole thing is super confusing.
Well, we're your
You know,
average
we're
homeowners, too.
relying on all of you to help us and, you know, keep that in mind too.
Sure thing.
So did you have a question for me?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you rent your place out with the?
We do not.
VRBO,
We
you're
bought
there
it
full
because
time?
we wanted to live.
You don't utilize that
We do
short-term
not,
rental?
nothing.
Okay, that was my
We
question.
live there 100% of the time and we love it here.
Thank
so.
you.
That's the only reason I'm involved.
All right. Thank you, Cliven.
Thank you.
Next is Robert Bello, if Mr. Bello is still here.
Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous and what have you, but so kind of like what Joanne just led off with, and if you think back to the opening comments of the public and just the comments here, I'm going to piggyback off of that. It's again with Gulf Lane. You haven't had, I don't think, a ton of people here on other aspects of it, but obviously, maybe to Andrew's point, maybe the presentation isn't as clear as it should have been. Maybe there needs to be a little bit more, discussions for the people that are on Gulf Lane, because that's predominantly who you have here. The people from Gulf Lane that are concerned with these changes, because as Joanne said, all the people here have said, this is kind of like the last little part that has predominantly single family houses, or I even hate to use the term multifamily because most of them are just duplexes, where you have a single family that owns both sides and maybe they rent it out, they have family come down like mine or whatever. And, it's really a residential area where you're walking down at night with your dog on the street on Gulf Lane. Nobody wants to walk on Gulf Boulevard. Everybody walks Gulf Lane. So if you could just bear with me, I'm going to be looking at my notes. I want to make sure I don't miss any of the, points I took some time to pull together that, I kind of feel that are important. One of the things I did notice in the presentation here that, on page 2, the first thing it did say is, that it's looking that Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan would protect the character and uniqueness of Johns Pass Village. What it didn't say, and maybe it's just an oversight by how it was written or whatever. And maybe the author didn't fully consider the unintended consequences of some of the impacts outlined in the proposal. And what I mean by that is, what a lot of the residents that are on Gulf Lane got together and were concerned about is you have kind of a natural demarc point from 130th on Gulf Lane heading north up to 135th. And there's not really that much of a change of what you see at 130th, 131st, 132nd, 133rd, 134th, all the way up to 135th, as far as condos. There's just a spattering of that. And it's again, the multifamily, single family. So where we're confused is, again, why did it cut at 133rd? We don't even see why it went past 130th. We think there's a natural cutoff. When you look at the map, you have all those short-term condo complexes or whatever you want to call it, that stop at 130th. That seems to be natural there where it would kind of cut. And you know what, maybe it's the residents being concerned about change. Everybody gets concerned about change, especially when they don't fully understand it. Like I think a lot of the people here have said, and Andrew said, hey, it's mostly the same. But then when we start hearing things about, well, there's going to be 0 lot lines, and right into development, it says in that area, it's a primary for redevelopment of mixed commercial use. Well, now all of a sudden, what I'm thinking, well, that's what you have at 150th. You got commercial on the bottom, you have residential up top, because that's what it says in the presentation. That reminds me of when I lived in Manhattan. It doesn't remind me of a beach town. It doesn't remind me of, Madeira Beach and Gulf Lane. So, those are our concerns. That is going to change the character of Gulf Lane. So just give me a second to kind of gather my thoughts again, because I kind of went off a little bit on a tangent there. Another thing I think I'd like to point out, and I don't know, I'm going to tell you what I think I know, not that I'm an expert on this or anything along the lines, but Gulf Lane, it's 15-foot wide. In your presentation, you guys outlined and you said, you know what? We know that is a challenge. That, and I think Fisherman's Alley, right? If we have commercial, that's what we're hearing. Hey, we want to encourage mixed use in this area. That means more traffic. From a traffic perspective, from the Green Book, this lane's only 15-foot wide. You're supposed to have 20 feet for a 2-lane highway. I mean, you can't get 2 cars going up and down the road. So although I understand what the books say, that there's not going to be more traffic, come on, let's be realistic. If there's more people, more commercial, there's going to be more traffic. And that is a problem right now. Are there provisions to go less than 20 feet to have a 2-lane highway? Yeah, if it's rural, you could get it down to 18 if you have 2 houses per acre. That's not what we have, So, those are some of my concerns. But, the last thing that, kind of I'm concerned about, again, going back to having more commercial potential for, some of the redevelopment of, multiple lots being put together for more condos and what have you is, I know Michael lives over there. I don't know that anybody else does, but we do have some problems with, I'll just call it riffraff. I mean, Joanne talked about the 150 students that, they trampled my fences. They were in my pool. Let me tell you what I've experienced in the past 2 weeks at my house. So I had a tourist gentleman, whatever you want to call it, who just got out of prison. So I guess maybe this is where, actually, as I think about it, when he was under my house, he was like, I'm on vacation. But long story short is, I get people under my house all the time. This gentleman less than 2 weeks ago was under my house. He was casing my house. And luckily, by me engaging the sheriff, giving him the information from my cameras and all that stuff, an hour later, they caught him. He was arrested for grand auto theft, fictitious plates, among other things, had a long rap sheet for burglary. And this isn't the first time I've had this. In 5 years, I've had 3 incidents of people coming into my house. You have additional, and I'm right at the, public access, so that makes it worse for me. But people go right through my gates. They don't care. They, it is what it is. In addition to that, this guy, he had a long rap sheet for burglary. He's been in prison for the past 5 years. He gotten out the past couple weeks. Also within the past 2 weeks, 3rd or 4th time in the past 5 years, I spend a lot of money on my plants, my palms and everything out front of my house. I even do a little area around the public access. I want that to look nice. It looked like crap before. I put up, nice borders and all that, succulents, palms. I had a lady out there less than 2 weeks ago for 8 hours digging up my palms, my succulents. No police saw this in 8 hours from 9 at night to 5 in the morning. And it's not the first time. Now, of course, when I reported that, along with this other one, it wasn't a concern. I had the lady's plate. Did they do anything? It's just a couple $100 a plant. What I'm getting at is if we redevelop or increase intensities, do we have the police to, keep things safe? I mean, what can we do to limit this sort of stuff? Because what I've been told by the officers is, you know what? We know that we have this problem because the thieves and things along those lines, they like staying along the public access because they could blend in with other people. And, that's a problem for people like me who live there. It's just something that I think if within a block or 2 of me, you do this with the possibly increased density or changing how things, it's only going to get worse. Those are my thoughts. What would I like to see? I like to see where either maybe more discussion on how we can address this transitional area and or cut it at 1/30th. So it's maybe even less intense. I don't know. It's just a talking point.
Okay. That it? Do we have any questions from our planning commission for Mr. Bello? Or Bello, sorry.
I'll ask you the same question. Do you utilize the VRBO type short-term rental with your property at all?
At times, I have 2 properties or 2 units on my lot.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bello? Anyone from the city want to ask Mr. Bello any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Bello.
Next is Thomas Edwards.
I think that you have the big responsibility here trying to decide, do you increase floor area ratio and also units per acre? And as you've heard from people before this part of it started, they were talking about the increase in density, that they weren't in favor of it. So please consider that when you make your decision. Looking at the survey that was taken, and one of the questions was, what is the best use on Pelican Lane? 46% said a single family home. The rumor is that there's a large lot that's been cleared on Pelican Lane. It's about a ½ acre. I went out and measured it here the other day. And the rumor was that someone was going to put 6 townhomes up there with about 9 bedrooms each. That's a pretty significant number. So it's a big lot. It's about a ½ acre there. And but it's not a single family home that's going to be there. It's going to be multifamily. And there's going to be a lot of people coming in and out if they do that type of project. Commissioner Kerr in the commission meeting when the presentation was given, and I watched that also and have the notes here from the meeting. It says he's concerned about increasing the density, which increases visitors. It would increase taxes and stress on services provided, which would increase cost. So that's just some of the things please consider when you're looking at this, is you don't have to do the staff recommendation. And I've worked with the planning folks before. I know most of them. They're very nice people. They do make mistakes at times. And I mean, I'm using Caddies as an example again, where they thought there would be adequate parking and there wasn't. Barefoot Beach, where they were going to allow an alcohol permit there that wasn't supposed to be allowed. And we were able to defeat that. So there are some mistakes that are made, and they're human like we all are. But please, what you have is a significant decision, and whatever you make, if you increase the density, the units per acre, it could drastically change the appearance of John's Pass for years and years to come. And again, if you talk to a lot of the people that come here as visitors and friends that come from family and go down to John's Pass, they like that small village feel. They only want to keep the buildings at about 2 or 3 stories. They don't want to see large buildings in John's Pass. You're going to lose that village concept if you do anything else. I'm open for questions.
Okay, anybody in questions for Mr. Edwards?
It's the same one. I know, I respect you have a protected address, but can you share, do you do the
I do
short-term rental and are you
I built
full-time
my house
resident?
and have lived there for 43 years and never rented it.
All right, thank you.
All right. I have a question in
Yes, sir.
general. I guess it would be for anybody who has been speaking about the Gulf Lane thing. Are you aware of what the current zoning is in the transitional area and what the density and floor area ratios are now? Right, so R3, that's correct. Right now, the units per acre allowed in the R3 zoning, I'm looking at Muni code right now, and it's 45 to 70 units per acre. The proposed is 24 to 50 for that area. And a 1 to 2 floor area ratio, the proposed is 1.5 floor area ratio. And you could go up to 75 units per acre only with the development agreement, and a 2.0 floor area ratio with the development agreement. The development agreement is, as we discussed, would involve public
Well,
input. and all that.
development agreements have problems sometimes. When Barefoot Beach was going to be built for the property that's between Gulf Boulevard and Gulf Lane, they wanted to move the building to within 10 feet of their south property line. And the city was going to allow them to do that. And we had to go there and object. We had to bring in an urban planner. We had to get an attorney we were going to bring in, because the only reason they were doing that is they were building a 6-story building there. They had a building in front that was 3 stories. And the reason they moved it south is so that they could have, because it originally was going to be a condo, so they could have more views of the Gulf and get a higher price for the units that had the beach view. And we got them to move it 70 feet away, but it was going to be 10 feet from the property south. And we finally got them to move it 70 feet more where it is right now. And we had people across the street at Madeira Bay and the residents on Gulf Lane that got involved with this. So as I say, the planners do make mistakes. I think that what's being proposed is a little excessive with the density and with the units per acre.
Okay. City staff, anyone have any questions for Mr. Edwards?
I do not.
Anyone?
Okay.
Good. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Next is James Levine. Either way.
I'll start with you, sir. We own a condo in Beach Place, 12901 Gulf Lane. It's been in the family for over 30 years. We saw Bubba Gump come up. We saw watch the old bridge turn into the new bridge. Being there as long as we have, we've seen lots of change. And we actually face the park, which is a blessing. We face the bridge. Where we are is a blessing and a curse. we're in a wonderful location. But with 129th Street right there, the bus stop right there, the crosswalk, the influx of people from the village is, for our particular property, overwhelming. Because they'll come down, either come straight across the street, the crosswalk, or get off the bus, and they look under a building, and there's the Gulf. And they turn, and they go right under our building, and either jump our fence, or break our fence gate, or jump in our pool. Like I said, where we are is a curse and a blessing, because people love to stay there, because it's just going to the bridge, and they're right there. Shops, restaurants, the place has so much character. Our concerns in general are the crosswalk, the bus stop, 25th Avenue, and the potential for a 72-unit facility being built at the end of the pass. If that happens, I don't know what we're going to do. We've proposed building fences, just a way to redirect people over to the park. It's not working, especially on the big weekends when, well, even Thanksgiving, it was nuts, which is great. It's great for the businesses. We do rent our unit, but we were in it. We've been coming here for Thanksgiving for many years. The noise level is already bad, but again, we've got the park, we've got the bridge, the motorcycles gunning up the bridge. 29th Avenue, the steady stream of traffic coming out of the village. I don't know if there's a way to get that one way. Have people come in one way at the bridge and go out at the other end, and maybe put a light at the other end by the bamboo. That's it. Most of the people there are concerned that it's going to change a lot. There's a bunch of us that have been in there for, I can think of at least 25 people that have been there over 20 years as owners. I don't think there's anyone still living there now. No, not permanent that we know of. That's it. This is where it becomes personal. I know you guys live here. We feel like we've lived here. My daughter learned to swim in the pool there as a baby. So we're not looking forward to change. Sometimes change can be good. Sometimes it can be bad. If what I think is about to happen happens, it's not going to be good for any of us, because it doesn't matter where you change the density. More people's just going to create, it is going to create more traffic. It's going to create more problems, be it legal or, we don't have a police force. So the sheriff, sometimes the sheriff is 20 minutes away when you see a fight in the park. There are a lot of concerns, of course, you've already been asked to look at those, but this is where, this is just, it's personal, which I would hope it is for all of you. I'm done.
Anyone on the planning commission have any questions for Mr.
Do you
Levine?
know how many units you have in your condo
We have
building?
57,
57, thank you.
and let's see, 20 or, well, 20 would be bridge front or pass front, and the other, well, do the math.
Yeah, 37, yeah.
The rest are beachfront, right?
Okay.
Any other questions?
Anybody got any questions? City staff, anyone? Question?
I do have a question. How many stories is the building, condo building you live?
We have parking underneath plus 5 stories. So that's total, I guess it's 6. But then we've got additional, all parking is not underneath the building. We've got additional property.
Right. Good.
Thank you.
All right,
Any more? Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
When was it built?
1983 or 4. We were like the 3rd owners. Whoever built it sold 6 years, he sold like,
In the
in the
early
80s.
80s.
Yeah, early 80s.
Yeah, like most of the condos that were built on the
Yeah.
beaches, early 80s, 79.
Yeah, contractor
83,
built
84.
it. He sold like 6 units to developer, and then they sold those to individuals.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the early 80s was a busy time.
Yep.
For sure. Okay,
All right,
thank you, sir.
thank you.
Appreciate that.
Now that all all of the affected parties have had an opportunity to present their information and testimony to the commission, it's now public comment.
Okay. Anybody for public comment? If you'd like to make a public comment at this time, please step forward, state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Mark, I heard me speaking here, perfect. My name is Mark Crawford. I live on 131st Avenue, 147, zoned for R2 right now. So first of all, I want to say I appreciate all the effort everybody's putting into this. Seems very well thought out. A lot of the comments from everybody tonight have been great. It's, everyone has their concerns, so it's great to see everybody coming together to really voice those. I think John's Pass, I've only been here a year now. I'm starting to get an understanding of the village itself and overall feel. It's been labeled as a fixer-upper. So it's really, great to see strides to improve that overall. When you go to the pass, I feel like it's not the same as what it used to be or what people remember it as. So I think it's a great opportunity for everybody here for us to, move forward some sort of plan to really attract more investors, maybe some revitalization in the community, as well as additional funding. I think a lot of references were made tonight to riffraff or, a bad crowd starting to come in. I think that may be symptom of having a, the older fishing village, as we mentioned, maybe they built in the 80s. A lot of that stuff could use revitalization. Let's see here. So I think, again, great opportunity for everybody. I think there is a miss here in the plan, specifically, I believe it was Thomas Blueshirt, correct? Brought up that 131st as well as 129th were missed for the transitional zone. I think that, comments also made by Andrew Morris here was that we're trying to improve the walkability of John's Pass, which is great. I think that's a great, something that would be great to achieve for everybody, including residents and for folks visiting John's Pass. However, the areas that are going to be impacted by that are not taken into account in this plan for 129th and 131st Avenue, both very much so within walking distance, both impacted by any changes that would take place. For example, my house, I'm within view of the, I believe the rumored 6 townhouses that will be on Pelican Lane, which I'm just finding out about tonight. So stuff like that, I think needs to be taken into account in the overall plan. However, I'm not opposed to the plan. I believe this is a great step forward. I think it's something we should continue to move forward, just with, again, concern and understanding of everybody's point of view, as well as, making sure that we account for the areas that are going to be directly impacted. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. Appreciate that.
Yes, my name's Brian Cummins. I'm at 13062 Gulf Lane. We have a small apartment complex there, Gulfview Apartments. And I liked one thing that was said earlier, that if we're trying to limit density, which is hard to tell that you are in that, so what is otherwise known as a resort area, starting the mixed use at say 130th where we are would help keep that density down in that zone. So I'm suggesting, just like this other gentleman did, that maybe the mixed use, the lighter blue zones start further south. We also experienced all the crowds and the problems that another lady brought up on that happened on Gulf Lane, people running through our properties from the beach. And the police eventually came, but it happened too much. And it's, I think, just symptomatic of what future increased resort facilities would probably encourage. The capacity, and when you say under capacity, this county doesn't lack for capacity for visitors. You already have plenty of capacity in terms of visitors, and we're already designated, John's Pass is already designated as the most visited off-beach destination on the Sunny Sun coast here. The issue is not, we don't need more tourism. It'll happen. It's already happened, and it will happen on its own without any additional capacity built into the resort area. Part of your problem here, and I've been on planning boards, and I appreciate controlled planning. And I believe in that. Now, what I don't think has been done in the informing the public, so to speak, that the process is that while you may not like the idea of speculating on what the final end product will look like, I personally believe in using a reverse approach to planning, where you look at the end product first before you start accepting a comprehensive plan overall. That then facilitates that end product that isn't necessarily what people want. So I wish you would consider that. Does the public, do the people that live here, are they going to be actually able to see a more graphic representation of what an end product could be under the plan that you're accepting to accommodate the county?
Thank you.
So I would suggest that you look at it a little bit in reverse and get public input for that.
I'm going to remind, our 3 minutes is up.
Oh, 3 minutes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Appreciate it.
appreciate your planning, but I also appreciate if you consider that we're already a success. Adding more could be a problem.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Please step forward, name and address. Oh, formal line. Thank you.
Kathy Collier, I live at 13145 3rd Street East. And I just want to speak on behalf of the people on the east side of this proposed extension. And I didn't come here with this fear, but after listening to Joanne and a few other people, I'm afraid that my little neighborhood, which is all very quaint little cottages, old, built in the 30s, suddenly we're going to have a 3, 4, 5-story condo, hotel, whatever, in our little neighborhood, and all the transients and the people and the traffic that come with that. And right now we're restricted to minimum 3-month rentals, which kind of keeps a lid on that risk. But I'm just now beginning to worry that somebody could come along and buy 2 cottages and put up a hotel on every block. And so that's sort of my concern. And I agree with the former speaker that we've had so many new hotels go up in this area. I mean, why do we need to expand at this point? Let's let the dust settle. I mean, do we have the infrastructure to accommodate all these buildings and people and then add more to that? I think I've seen some wonderful changes here. I've been coming since the 80s. My family have owned a house in that little neighborhood, and beautiful changes lately. 5-10 years ago, it's been a whole facelift in many ways, which is fine. It's bringing the tourists, but I think we need to just let the dust settle. And as someone said before, fast forward 20 years down the road, and what has become of our area because of these plans. I'm not sure what the agenda is or what the intent is, or why do you have to even extend to my neighborhood at 133rd to experience growth. I think it's going to happen with what we have now. That's it.
Okay.
Down to the second.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Susan Fortson. I'm in the low intensity mixed use area. I'm the owner of the Sea Turtle Bungalows on Pelican Lane and 129th. I wasn't planning on getting up here and saying anything. I like some of the others, I don't understand all of the technical part of what's happening, but from what I can figure, it's not changing terribly much. But I am concerned about that one area that the gentleman was speaking of with the hotels, and if they could go up 6 floors and stuff, that I would be, I am against going up that high. And I do know that those townhouses down the street. I don't know what their setback is. They look really large and I think there's possibly only 3 or 4 residents, permanent residents left on that street on Pelican Lane. Other than possibly maybe some of the apartments, the mixed use, I guess is what you call it. But I would like to reiterate that I, wouldn't like to see the high buildings. And I don't know the measurements of that piece of land. I have heard the rumors of the hotel, and I'm not against a hotel being there. I only have 9 units. I can only, help help so many people. I'm not worried about, the competition of a hotel, but I do think that the reason why I moved here, I'm originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was living in Denver when I came here and bought this piece of property. What drew me to this area was the quaintness of the neighborhood and the area. I didn't want to go back to Fort Lauderdale or many South Beaches, what it's turned into. And so I do love the quaintness of this area, and I would hate to see it get too high rising especially in the middle of John's Pass. I'd hate to see something really large there. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Public comment? Thank you.
Jean Farnan, 574 Johns Pass Avenue. I just kind of want to point out, because I know that you are going to be considering this plan. And as a planning commission, you're an advisory board. And unfortunately, you have been given in the past some very inaccurate information that you have voted on that, has caused many problems and lawsuits. And because you based it on information you were given by professionals. And I think you should look at what the credibility is of the information that you have been fed by some of these professionals. And that we have been out of compliance with the county's comprehensive plan since 2008. And nothing has been done about it. Other than now to change this to an activities center so that we can be in compliance and then go beyond. The subjective things with developments, plan developments, or development agreements, that's kind of a joke, because setbacks are ignored, ordinances are ignored, written specifications are ignored. So I would really hope you would consider the worst case scenario of any decision you make based on how this city operates. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more for public comment? Please.
Commissioner Jeff Beggins. I live right around the corner from Johns Pass on Bogosiega Drive, 429 Bogosiega Drive. And I have to speak on this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, just to take away a lot of people's threats and insults and attacks that I think are unwarranted and biased. But I think looking at this, there's some major fundamental misperceptions about what's going on. I look at this town through my kids' eyes, right? I mean, what we're deciding is not necessary for the people in this room, it's for the future generations that are coming up here, and given flexibility here. What the gentleman said earlier, change is inevitable, it's gonna come. And this plan controls that. Nothing here provides for any development to happen. And I think when people try to sway that, that's wrong. It's fear mongering, it's not true. This does not allow any project to happen at all. Anyone who brings a project to the city is gonna have to go through planning and zoning commissioners. We all know the whole process. So to try to make people have fear that this is gonna create a, what was 1,800 room hotel, somebody was spewing ideas out there, that's just not fair to scare people. That's not true. What I like about this is looking for the future. I got little kids, the walkability sucks. What I didn't know is that we can't really fix that the way that it is until it becomes a traffic corridor, which I learned recently, which allows for wider sidewalks, more directional, safer areas for the future, right? And so I think that this is something that gets missed as far as what can actually happen here. Traffic lights, bike lanes, full sidewalks, be a mobility hub. Somebody mentions the Sun Runner. Where are you going to put the stops, right? You have to be a traffic corridor to do this, and this activity plan does that. So it actually thinks to the future for all of that. So that's really what I wanted to say is, thank you for not going to the upper levels of density. I live here because I don't want to live in Clearwater Beach either. And it's a beautiful town and it is quaint. And this does not change density. This is not, I shouldn't say that. It changes the potential for future generations, but it's up to the commissioners at that time to decide what they think is right for the town at that time, right? So I think that that's forward thinking. And then for those who say that this was, we need more time and that wasn't promoted, I think that's complete crap, because I was personally at multiple meetings in the chambers and at Johns Pass. And these are all posted meetings, just like today. Everyone could be here. I would rather be home with my kids as well, right? But it's important to me to see this. So this was posted, and I think you guys did a great job, and I commend the city for looking for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more? Oh.
I do have one question because I'm still trying to understand about a point that was brought up concerning the transitional area versus the low density. I think what you've heard here is that you have a jewel, a little piece of paradise that's sitting right on the Gulf, and it's Gulf Lane. And people use it to walk up and down. They feel very safe in those areas, pretty much so, except at high traffic times and on the beach access. So what I think I've heard, and I'm in the same vein, is that from 130th all the way through to 135th. This is your little jewel. This is the area that is attracting many people to come because they have smaller hotels, they have the VRBOs, and it's just old Florida, a little bit of old Florida. Then they can walk to the pass and they can have those kinds of activities. So I'd like an explanation, because the way that I understood it is the low density is 45 to 60, right? And you said it wasn't going to be so high, but the transitional area is 50 to 75. Can you explain that?
Could I just interrupt for a minute and ask you to state your name and your address?
I'm very sorry. I'm Rose Loggett, 13231 Golf Lane. Log it like you log it in a book.
Perfect. It's not really a question and answer time. I'm sorry. It's just a public comment thing, so we can't really engage back and forth.
Okay,
I
if that
apologize
can
for
be
that.
clarified and also maybe taken to consideration protecting Gulf Lane. It is different than I can understand going to 133rd because you have that road that goes right across there that have Madeira Bay, is it? Right there on the corner. And so you included the Gulf Lane aspect of it to maybe change that a little bit. On the east side, it's a little bit different than the west side. And also, I don't know about 100 and some odd or 1,000 rooms or whatever. I think the whole point between FAR and building size needs to be clarified. I think what we're saying is that the area around the pass is 2 to 3 stories, if you consider Bubba Gump's and the parking garage. But to make any kind of hotel or condo that is going in, being proposed there, consistent with the pass. And also, just like in the building codes in the little island down there, Anna Maria Island, is to make it consistent. Whatever you put, don't put brick and mortar out there, make it look like it is part of the village, to keep that village look, to keep it consistent. Thank you.
Thank you. Man, perfect timing. Okay, got a couple more? Oh. We'll get to you.
Bello 13301 Gulf Lane. I just want to follow up on something that I got from before. don't really want to get into the whole density debate or any of that, but when you look at any current or future planning activities, if you could really please consider having, as a part of that, some proper facilities. And what I mean by that, again, I live right on the public access. So when people come off the beach, in a lot of areas, you have bathrooms, you have hoses, things along those lines. So one of the big inconveniences that I have weekly, if not a couple times a week, people coming under my house to urinate, use my shower, use my hose, change, things along those lines. If we're going to try to encourage, we're going to have more people and encourage people to come to the beaches, give them a place to change, give them porta potties, give them some water so they're not encouraged to go to my house and use my stuff and, scare, my wife, me, whatever. It's just, look at those things as far as, amenities that we should be offering, I think, and see how we could do that. I would appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. You ready, Mr. Tagliarelli? Here's your chance.
Thank you. David Tagliarini, 13322 First Street East. I'm here as a resident. I live on right off of 133rd. As a member of the Board of Commissioners, I was present during the most recent Board of Commissioner workshop when this plan was presented. We pushed this back to the Planning Commission because we really didn't feel like we could make an informed discussion on the matter. So I just wanted to make that clear. That's why it came back, because we had consensus on the board. We didn't totally get it. A question that's come up from many of my neighbors is who instigated this change? Why is this happening? Whose idea was it? Was there some emergency? Why are we doing this? I think that is a question that could be answered. I understand that you're not answering my questions at this point. I just think that would be something that the residents might like to know. I understand. I understand that we're applying to be a community center, which is a couple of notches down within the activity center heading. But what safeguards are there to prevent the density from being increased to the county-wide community center standard? The activity center would put us at 19.44 residential units per acre, but the county community center standard is 90. I think people are seeing that and they'd like to know what's preventing us from doing that in the future. I received a letter from the city announcing a public forum on this subject. My application was submitted as an affected party on October 28th, but I was not included on tonight's list of affected parties. I'm not sure why. That said, I've been a property owner on Madeira Beach for 25 years. I spent a short time on the Madeira Beach Board of Adjustments when we had such a thing. And I was not aware of those two town hall meetings that apparently happened before. Probably my fault. I'm just saying, I've been here a long time. I've been active, didn't know about them. And I was not given an opportunity to take a survey. I would like to suggest that if possible, we take it from there. Let's have some well-announced, well-advertised town meetings. Maybe we had them, but it seems to me like there are a lot of questions about it now. I think we could answer a few questions. I have to be honest, I don't see this as a terrible designation. I just like to understand it. I do agree that coming up to 133rd that puts it pretty close to me. So I'm not as thrilled about that. I just think that we need more information. Maybe people are paying attention more for whatever reason. So that's my point for speaking here today is I'm pretty active in the city and this is kind of new to me. I'm still confused in some respects. And also the part about what are our guarantees that we won't get to countywide community standards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good timing. All right, any more for public comment? I think that's pretty much everybody. All right, I appreciate all the input. Thank you very much.
You were at the point that the city has a chance to present a rebuttal to everything they have heard since their initial presentation, should they wish to.
I
Gentlemen,
have
and
no
lady.
rebuttal. I have perhaps a couple of answers or responses to a couple of the questions that were asked that I can
Please.
respond to, if that's appropriate at this time.
Sure.
Let me first address Commissioner Taglerini's last point about what guardrails or safeguards there are. We have specifically stipulated in the plan document, can't find the language right now, that any amendment to the proposed density intensity regulations, once adopted, would constitute not only an amendment of the activity center plan, but would require an amendment of the countywide plan as well. So we are stipulating very clearly that while those are outside limits that we have to stay within, we have stipulated to stay with whatever is adopted. And if that were to change, even still within the parameters of the countywide plan, it would require an amendment to the activity center plan and a corresponding amendment to the countywide plan to put them on notice that we had made that change. So that's maybe just a point of information. Another point that traversed several of the comments about the transitional district. Important to understand that the area that's in the transitional district north of, I'm sorry, on the east side of Gulf Boulevard is now in commercial and residential office retail. It in fact allows considerably more commercial as a matter of right than would the activity center plan. And on the west side of Gulf Boulevard, the area in the transitional district is part of the current resort category that allows up to 20% of the floor area to be devoted to commercial. That would be an issue if we're going to basically take those rights away from someone that's there now. That's something I would want to have the city attorney address and make sure we're on good grounds there to do that. But that's partly the explanation of why it goes to where it does go to and what's provided for in that transitional district, because a component of that current district allows for that combination of uses. Not to say that can't be changed, but that would be a change from what is allowed today.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Anyone else? City?
One thing I just wanted to reiterate is comparing the existing resort facilities medium category that's in our comprehensive plan that's approved right now and what is being proposed in the transitional and the Johns Pass Resort category. So as you can see, the floor area can vary depending on lot size, and you have currently 18 residential units per acre, and the temporary lodging is 45 to 75 depending on lot size. What's being proposed in Johns Pass Resort and in transitional would be 24 units per acre residential, and then 75 temporary lodging units per acre by right, or 100 with a development agreement. With the transitional, it would be 50 by right or 75 with a development agreement. The floor area ratio for transitional doesn't go above what it is currently. And with Johns Pass Resort, if potentially with a development agreement, it could go up 0.5 from what the max is now, depending on acreage, which is 2. The transitional would still have the 20% cap on commercial floor area on the beach side, because we understand it's primarily a residential with some temporary lodging facilities mixed in, so that would still stay the same. And we don't want to allow anything straight commercial. Like, so with the way what we're proposing, you couldn't do something like a restaurant or anything like a single use rest. You're not allowed to do that. That would continue this be the case. The process for this started about 2 years ago in 2020, based off of compatibility issues between our plan and the countywide plan. I think I think that's the end of my rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. Any more from the city? It sounds like we got it covered. Okay,
You are at the point that you, as the chairman, can allow for summaries of all those that have already spoken. You can put a time limit on those summaries should you choose to. But that is where we are, a summary from the city and summary from all affected parties, should they have one.
okay. I guess we should let the people be heard. Let's do a 3-minute time limit as we've done before. If anybody that's an affected party wants to bring forward a summary in addition to what they've already presented, we're happy to hear that at this point. I would like to keep it at 3 minutes. It is getting late. If you have any new information to present, now would be the time to do that, or if the city would like to present something, but I'll ask our affected parties first to come forward if anybody wants to present a 3-minute synopsis or additional information. Good? All good? Thank you. City, anyone want to add? Do we want to add any more?
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman, unless the board has questions of me.
Thank you. We'll get to that in a minute. Any more? Andrew, you okay?
The only other thing, we do have impact fees adopted as an ordinance that we adopted. It's been about a year. And that does include, so that would be on new development. Has to pay an impact fee that would have to pay for improvements directly related to that development. And it allocates money to different things. And that was an ordinance approved because we understand that new development does have an impact on community, and we want to mitigate it and to make sure that it has a positive impact on community and not a negative one. But that's a separate ordinance that was approved previously. That's all I have to say.
Okay, very good. Now we move on to our commission discussion
Are you ready for a motion?
or a motion.
A motion, a second, and then you can talk as long as you'd like.
Okay, I would need a motion for or against the proposed ordinance 2023-01 Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan. Once we have a motion and a second, then we can go into discussions in more detail and ask questions of the city based on, we can discuss. Okay, so here I sit. Yeah, the motion would be to either approve or reject. If the
I'll make a
motion is to
motion.
approve, it's based on the finding of fact and in compliance with the comprehensive plan to accept blah, blah, blah.
I'll make a motion to approve 2023-01
Based on a finding of fact.
based on finding of fact.
And it's in compliance with the
And it's
comprehensive
in
plan.
compliance with the comprehensive plan,
Okay,
yes.
sorry. So we have a motion to approve ordinance 2023-01 Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan based on a finding of fact and in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Do I have a second to that motion, please?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're up for discussion.
So I have a question.
Okay,
So we've been working on this for quite some time. We've had multiple meetings. I know that there have been public meetings. The commission has had it before them and discussed it. And as I recall, and I just would like to clarify, when this first came before us, it came to us because there is not just a want, but a need for us to get into compliance with the county. And whatever we vote for and approve and send to the commission, and the commission then votes and approves, it has to go to the county for final approval. And also, I would just like to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong on all of this, that in doing this, we're not really increasing, we're more getting in line with what already exists in the event that we had a catastrophic event and buildings were lost, they would be able to be rebuilt. I personally, just to be on the record, don't know anything about a hotel or condos or any of that. And I also know that here tonight, that is not what we are voting on. We are voting on what is in the document that is presented to us, period. We're not voting on anyone's opinions of what might be built or could be built or can be built. Those are all things that would come to us at a later date. Am I correct? I don't know who I'm asking. I suppose I'm asking you.
You need to ask your fellow board members and they can give their
Okay.
opinions as to that.
I mean, do you
Am I wrong in
That's
my
my
thinking on
understanding.
that? Okay.
Anyone have any other comments about it?
No, I think you're right on there. The bulldozers are not coming in tomorrow. This is a plan, so if there is a hurricane, we're not trying to do this while all the buildings are destroyed. So this is to put it in place ahead of time. And like you said, then the county has to approve it. We are just making a recommendation. This is not a final say.
Has anyone considered, some things were brought up about 131st and 129th being included? I know we had discussed it in a prior meeting, and it was brought up that those are still very much residential in nature. I know I live on 131st, so it would certainly affect me. Is that something that should be considered to add those in there, or let it ride the way it is? Should there be an amendment to add those areas in, or is that just muddying the waters even further? I'll just look for your guys' direction. I mean, it's something that's been brought up.
I too also live on 131st, and it was discussed, and I do believe it should be included somehow, some way. Not that, it's gonna be that someone buys up all the places and puts up a hotel, but somehow to include those two. If you look at the map, as the one gentleman pointed out, they're like two little islands just sitting out there, well, actually peninsulas, just sitting out there by themselves, and they're gonna be very much affected by what goes on. So for them to be included, I think would be better for the city or for everybody in the community to think about. I don't have the answer, though.
I agree to that.
Am I allowed to ask a procedural question of the city at this point?
Procedural question, yes.
Well, in that, would it invalidate everything that's been done here if we were to want to include those areas?
You can approve as presented, approve with conditions, or deny. So I don't know enough about the planning aspect to say if that would just be a condition, or does that, I think we have to go to them. Does that mean they have to rework the whole plan if you were to add those little streets? So I don't know enough to tell you if that would be considered a condition or if it changes everything.
Chairman, if I can speak
Please.
to the whole issue. I do recall the discussion you had with the board when Jenny presented this a month or so ago. And I thought the decision at that time was there was a good reason not to include it specifically, because there was a differentiation as to the zoning there and what that permitted. And when we talk about the low intensity mixed use area, that allows for temporary lodging, potentially a hotel, and things that I think would not be appropriate to 129th and 131st. We recognize that they're intimately a part, if you will, of the larger Johns Pass neighborhood. And to the point Mr. Crawford made earlier, I think that was a good point. We speak specifically under the design guidelines to the importance of transition to these neighborhoods. There are two main areas that we're concerned about the transition. One is the backside, if you will, of Village Boulevard as it fronts, or as the frontage to Pelican Lane. What we can do to minimize that appearance and conflict and so forth with the uses on Pelican Lane. And we recognize specifically that there's an important point of transition to those residential neighborhoods on 129th and 131st that could be addressed in part with perhaps better signage, that these are individual private residential uses that would discourage through traffic, for the importance of attending to the transition when something is proposed at that adjoining area within Johns Pass Village in the commercial core or boardwalk area as it affects those areas. So it is a very distinct area, and I think ought to be treated separately as it is now. Now, to answer the question posed to the attorney, if we're going to include it in the activity center, I would recommend it be a yet altogether separate district than anything we've created because of the potential for commercial use there. And secondly, I think it would require that before it could be adopted, whether it come back to this board or to the commission, it would have to be re-advertised and all of the calculations redone to include that area. Because it's more than a condition. It is a major change to the configuration of the activity center.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so we still stand with a motion to adopt or to approve, excuse me, to approve the proposed ordinance 2023-01. Any other discussion from our planning board members on that topic?
Yes, Mike, something to consider. A lot of people were here talking about Gulf Lane, but is it something unique be carved out for them? And it's a unique neighborhood, just some food for thought.
I'm not sure if that's something we could do as a condition to change that. That would have to be an amendment to the motion. The motion maker would have to accept that amendment to the motion if that's something you wanted to do. Personally, I also own a property on Gulf Lane. As just a personal reference, I don't, and I'm in that transitional area. I don't see that it changes my use or anyone's use in there. It doesn't have a huge fundamental change. The units per acre are 45 to 75 now. The proposal would be only up to 75 with a development agreement. The floor area ratio is not changing. It's 1 to 2 now. It's proposed to be a 1.5 up to 2 only with a development agreement, which also relates to Pelican Lane as well. Even though that's a different character area, but it has similar characteristics in the proposal. I don't see where it's fundamentally changing personally, but if that's something you would like to propose to the motion maker to carve that area out, that's up to the motion maker to decide if they want to take that amendment to their motion. Am I correct in that, Mr. Attorney?
Yes.
Thank you. Thought so.
So I don't know exactly what you'd want to do. I'm not sure. I mean, what I think that what I hear is maybe misunderstanding of what's going to happen when it changes. But when you lay out the changes, there is no real change other than just it's part of the activity center.
I think there was some misunderstanding with regard to the commercial
Right.
aspect of it,
I
which
think
is
so
already
too.
there. In the current ordinance, the commercial aspect is already there. If you think about some of the properties there, my immediate neighbor is TRS. That's totally commercial. That wouldn't be allowed to be done that way again if that building were destroyed, right, or torn down to be redeveloped. And there are some other commercial enterprises. I know one of the buildings there used to have a salon in the downstairs. Now I think it's been converted to an apartment. That's right across from the Madeira Bay, the cantina next to the parking lot. There's some other ones there that are more pretty intense uses of vacation rentals as well. A couple cottages that are pretty heavily used. I don't see it changing the character of that neighborhood. I personally, I don't. But it's just one guy's opinion.
It was just food for thought, really.
Yeah.
A lot of people were here talking about it and.
Sure.
Again,
No, it's obviously been a concern. That's why all these people are here, right? I mean, everyone we've heard from is pretty much all Gulf Lane. But I think on some levels, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what's already there versus what's proposed. And as we've laid out, it's not getting worse. Nobody's proposing to shrink the road size or add more traffic to it or anything like that. I don't see it coming, and anything that would go, and I know Barefoot Beach Resort has been a thorn in a lot of people's sides on Gulf Lane, but that was subject to a development agreement, which then triggers all of those public hearings where people can come out and voice their opinion on those particular projects.
And that was a good example that they moved the building over.
Correct,
when the
and it
public
worked.
put in- Right,
Yeah,
so the
that-
system worked. and
the
that
system
would
worked at
all
that point.
work here as well.
I agree. Okay. All right,
Fair
so
enough.
we're Pat. Okay.
So do we have to change the motion to they want to move it down?
If that were Mr. Marr's predilection to do that, and then he would have to request of the motion maker to amend the motion to carve out a particular area.
And add to the motion to take a look at 129th and 131st.
Well, it wouldn't be to take a look at, it would be to specifically carve out a particular area, and that's, would be our recommendation,
Okay,
right?
so we would add that.
If they were so inclined.
It seems to me that, sorry from, coming from the sky here.
No, you're good. Thank you. Appreciate your
It
input.
seems to me that the transitional area is tending to protect what is already there, which we've discussed a few times now. I would think that if you want anything lower than transitional at 131st and Pelican, excuse me, then there's no reason to include it in part of this plan. I think if you're not going to say it's transitional, then it probably doesn't belong, which I think is what Mr. Healy was referring to. And then in terms of Gulf Lane, I guess my only question would be, why was 130th to 131st Johns Pass Resort and not transitional? Because it seems like the transitional might be able to protect a little bit more that's there. If you follow.
Well, the transitional starts at 131st.
Yeah, between 130th and 131st is Johns Pass Resort and not transitional.
Right, it ends at the condos, Madeira Norte condos,
Right.
right? And then it goes from there. So that is the end of the Johns Pass Resort.
Yeah,
And
that
then
section.
Right, and then starting at, it's the property my wife owns, starts there, becomes the transitional and travels north up to 133rd.
Right. It just, if you go to, it's page 18 on the document I have, but it was the existing uses in Johns Pass Village. Between 130th and 131st on Gulf Lane, that's where the single family residential really is. So I guess what I'm getting at is, if any part of that was going to change on Gulf Lane, I would feel that maybe that section would be transitional and not Johns Pass Resort.
But it is transitional. Right where the single family starts on that map is where the transitional starts. So if you look at where it changes, if you're looking at the same map, I don't know if you can see what Andrew has up on the screen. It goes from dark blue to the gray blue color. That's the dark blue ends right where Madeira Norte is, right across from the Bamboo Beer Garden. And then starts at my wife's property, 13024. And then right behind us is a single family house directly on the beach. So we have Gulf Boulevard on one side, Gulf Lane on the back. And then Brian, I just forgot his last name, but he has a single family house right on the beach. So that's exactly where that transitional starts. Oh, you're talking about going one block south with the transitional.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but that would only be Madeira Norte.
Madeira Norte actually had like higher density than a lot of the other buildings down there.
Yeah, so Madeira Norte, as Andrew said, I don't know if you heard him, it has a higher density already than would be allowed. So it would be undoing, it would be basically a taking from Madeira Norte's property rights if we were to go south by a block. Because the only thing one block south of there would be Madeira Norte. And then there is one house out in front that's now commercially used. Sunhost Resorts has the downstairs. And then there's a parking lot between that and Madeira Norte's parking lot. So
yeah, because I'm looking at this, excuse me. I'm just looking at this, the existing uses and densities map. And I'm seeing 4 single family residential lots, and then a couple of kind of sandwiched between 2 condos. So I'm just trying to add to the point of maybe trying to consider changing a little bit of that to help protect it in that transitional versus the resort. But I understand if maybe we're kind of boundary oriented by streets, maybe we can't do that. But just a thought. And then, as I said, for going back to the 131st and Pelican Lane, or excuse me, 129th, I would say if you don't want, how do I say this? If it's not going to be transitional, if you want it to be less than transitional, then it doesn't need to be included. But otherwise, you need to be
Okay.
at least transitional, right, to be in this plan. That's my only point.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. All right, everybody get where he's headed? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the voice from this guy. It's always a little weird, isn't it? This whole Zoom
Yeah.
thing, right? But no,
I don't know how
appreciate
to interject on that, but
I know you're great.
So,
Just wait for me to take a breath and just jump in. You're fine.
right.
Okay. Any more discussion from our members on the motion?
You know, it depends if they're changing the motion or not, because there seems like there's a lot of moving parts now, and the Board of Commissioners threw it back to us. And it still doesn't seem to be defined as what people want, you know, they want to move it, they want to do this and that, so I'm just speaking out loud. Maybe we're not ready for a motion.
Well, we have a motion. I guess if you feel we're not ready, it would be reflected in your vote. But we have a motion on the table to approve, to recommend this, to go to the city commission for their approval, which then obviously that has to go to the county. So is there any more discussion anyone would like to add before we call for a vote? Good. All right.
And I think it just needs to be clear for everybody because there was a lot of back and forth. The motion is to approve as it's been presented to you. There's been no conditions and no changes to the motion.
Correct. Okay. Seeing no other discussion, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner Noble,
No.
Commissioner LaRue,
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff,
Yes. The motion passes. Ordinance 2023-01 has been approved. Okay, on to the next item of new business, ordinance 2023-02, amending the future land use map to add Johns Pass Village Activity Center.
And ordinance 2023-02, an ordinance of the city of Madeira Beach, Florida, amending the future land use map designation of the city's comprehensive plan from commercial general, recreation, open space, residential medium, residential office, retail, and resort facilities medium to activity center for the area as set forth in the accompanying legal description in Exhibit A attached here 2, and hereby made a part of this ordinance, providing for future revitalization and development within the activity center category to be consistent with and pursuant to the procedures, guidelines, and standards of the Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan as adopted by ordinance 2023-01. And as such plan may be implemented and administered through the adoption of a Johns Pass Village Activity Center zoning districts, providing for transmittal to and considerations by Forward Pinellas and the Countywide Planning Authority for corresponding amendment to the countywide future land use map to the countywide plan category of activity center, community center, providing for transmittal to the Florida State Department of Economic Opportunity for their review and comment, providing for the filing of this amendment to the city future land use map in the office of the city clerk, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
That's a lot.
It's a
Thank you.
lot.
Okay. The city, please.
Nothing further except to say this is the way the adoption of the plan would be portrayed and implemented on the map, and they really need to run together.
You're saying this is a companion.
It is.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone in the city? Andrew, anything?
As Dave said, it's a companion to the special area plan or Johns Pass Village Activity Center plan.
Okay. All right. Any affected parties?
Everyone except Mr. Loggett's notice included this ordinance also. So Ms. Claiborne, Mr. Bello, Mr. Edwards, and Mr. Levine are all affected parties per their notice of intent that was filed timely.
Okay. Anyone have anything they want to say as an affected party?
I don't understand what we're even doing now at this point. If I can just make that general comment, I think what you just read off, I don't even know what that means.
Okay, do you want to do it or do you want me to do it?
You don't have to read it.
No,
I think the best explanation was actually Mr. Healy just provided. This is, as they've been talking about, step one was to get the approval for the city. Step two is the city now has to send, if the board commission, city commission agrees with the recommendation by this board, it has to go to the next step to the county, to the countywide plan, and this helps facilitate that. That's the best way I can explain it, but Mr. Healy might, or Mr. Morris might be able to explain it even better.
Okay, it's just the stuff you read is so.
Yes.
mumbo jumbo.
Yes, it is.
I thought what we just did was the whole vote.
No.
All of a sudden you're.
Yep. Two separate steps.
Yep.
That was the written document. This is the map that accompanies.
Yeah.
okay. Seeing no affected parties wishing to speak at this point, we'll ask for any public comment. If you got any public comment, please feel free to step up, take your 3 minutes of fame.
Take that long. I just, Diane Holtman. I live on the east side of Gulf Boulevard. And I just would like to reiterate how important it is, if I can back up what the side of the room said, that I think it does need a makeover. John's Pass, once again, I state is I do believe it's a crown jewel in our city. And I do believe that we could make it so it would be a place for the tourists to enjoy and a place for the residents to enjoy, and it would connect us to the county. I think we need to see not only the trees, but also the forest in all of this too. And we're just, getting us aligned with the county, our little city. And it's like a bigger thing for our city, not just parochial
Thank you.
talk. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Public comment? Okay. Seeing none. So we have nothing to rebut at this point, so we can move into the commission discussion. We'll take a motion at this point and then discuss. I always forget the whole motion part. We'll do the motion first. If anyone would like to make a motion, whether to accept, approve or not. 2023-02.
I'll make the motion to approve ordinance 2023-02, amended the future land use map to add Johns Pass Village Activity Center.
Okay, so we have a motion. I need a second, please.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2023-02 to amend the future land use map and add the Johns Pass Village Activity Center. Any discussion from our planning commission? Quiet group. Okay, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Mar,
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner Noble,
No.
Commissioner LaRue,
Yes.
and Chairman Wyckoff.
Yes. The approval is granted at this point. Okay, so we're moving forward to the next item on our agenda, which is the Planning Commission meeting schedule for 2023. What do you got?
It's in the packet there. I think you just have to kind of bless it.
Okay.
Find it. Come on now. But there is a schedule in there for the meetings for 2023. And it's basically just you guys saying that. Nothing is really changing. I mean, the meetings are always going to be on that first Monday. It's page 154. So it's the very
Very last
end of your initial packet. And then I tacked on a couple other
Okay.
things, but
Fell asleep before I got there.
but it's really the first Monday of the month unless it's a holiday and then we push that. And so we push it to the next week. And then the rest of the category or the rest of the columns are really just kind of notice periods. So you're, basically just subtracting days to say, here's when someone has to submit a
Okay.
zoning or site plan application, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the planning commission meeting schedule.
I'll make a motion to approve the planning commission regular meeting schedule for 2023.
Well stated, sir. I need a second.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. We have a motion and a second. Let's call the roll.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
Oh, does anybody want to talk about it?
I'm kidding. Okay. All right.
We're all talked out,
Or longer meetings.
right?
Commissioner
Yeah.
Noble,
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly,
Yes.
Commissioner Marr,
Yes.
Commissioner LaRue,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Chairman Wyckoff.
Yes,
Thank you.
we have a schedule. Thank you. Any old business? Please, God. Okay, administrative and staff presentations. The Madeira Beach Comprehensive Plan presentation. Mr. Murphy, the moment you've been waiting for. Appreciate your patience.
For the record, Jerry Murphy with the University of Florida. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have in front of you is the mobility element of the comprehensive plan for your evaluation and appraisal, and the private property rights element that was recently adopted. You will recall, some of you anyway, that this commission did a major lift effort on the mobility element in preparing for the proportionate share development fees that were adopted. And so it's really not anything too new. What we've done, if you want to go through it, is where the policies previously referenced areas that they were moved for in the plan. Now they're here. And so we're taking those concurrent references out. Those are the strike throughs in red. Also in policy 5.2.5.3, we have eliminated the roads that have already been constructed based on what the work that's been done last couple of years. The data and analysis has been updated, and that's for your evaluation and strike through and underline as well. There's a highlight in the second to last page regarding the proposed John Pass Village Activity Center, because we're sort of doing that right now. Ultimately, we may take that out depending on how these ships pass in the night, so to speak.
Understood.
And other than that, we put in a brief narrative that basically says that the state required us to put in the private property rights element, and so we did. And I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer.
Perfect. Lady and gentlemen, any questions for Mr. Murphy?
And if you don't have any tonight, I'll see you next week.
Let's see. Oh, that's right. We're doing this next week again, aren't we? Perfect. All right. Yeah. Okay. So seeing no questions, I forgot how, we have to take, we don't do any motions. We're
This is
good.
just for your evaluation and
Our evaluation,
appraisal.
I forgot about that part, right? Thank you.
And, you know, we're getting down to the end. There'll be two more elements next week. And then at the beginning in January, we'll be doing land use. And land use is going to be probably the biggest lift of this effort because of all the work that's being done with regard to the activity center
Right.
and aligning our zoning districts and future land use map districts with the counties.
Okay. All right. So we're bringing ourselves into alignment in several directions. So appreciate the effort. Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for a brief report. Appreciate all the work that went into it. Any other discussion by members of the Planning Commission? Thank you. Next meeting is Monday, December 5th, 1 week from tonight at 6 p.m. right back here in the same place. We'll look forward to seeing everyone. Do we have any informational materials that need to be presented at this point? Nope.
No.
Mr. Healy, yes, sir.
Thank you all for your patience. It's a heck of a way to introduce myself.
Right.
Long meeting, but look forward to working with you down the line.
No, thank you for taking all the questions and handling them with civility and doing all the things that we're supposed to do. I know a lot of work went into this and we thank you for that. Anything else for the good of the commission? All right, we're going to call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.